Out of the gates and ready to go. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow underway on this Tuesday edition. Glad you're with us across the OutKick network, which includes our YouTube channel, streaming live right now. You can join us just by searching out OutKick if you're not there yet, and join Chad in the chat. If you're listening to this great radio partner, we say thank you. Big show today. John McClain will join us. The craziness across the NFL. No shortage of storylines on or off the field. That will be in about an hour and a half from right now, always in the second hour with us on Tuesdays. Amy Dash, who joins us whenever we need legal insight. She's Odyssey's legal insider. We'll get the very latest on what will be taking place on Friday at the hearing where Michigan will be looking for the temporary restraining order, and Jim Harbaugh looks to attend this hearing. We will get Amy's take on what to expect, maybe what's been said but isn't necessarily true, and much more. That's later in the show. Plus, Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl. We will scout college football for the top players in the NFL. Chad, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Hutton. Excited for today's show. Going to get to a little bit of legalese. We may have to ask Amy Dash whether or not Jim Harbaugh can actually pull off Tom Cruise from A Few Good Men, as he claims he's going to attempt to do. As he defends himself in court on Friday. He'll be there to defend himself.
The presser was glory. It was glory. It was more than just we're America's team. We'll have some quotes from him coming up. Not America's team, the Buffalo Bills. They were last season with all the preseason hype, and since then they have had a significant drop-off. Played well last season, and this year, Chad, now looking at their fifth loss. Wrong again for me on Monday night, where Buffalo primed for a get-right game against Denver. Against a defense, however, that has been able to get right against some good opponents. They beat Kansas City, and now a win over the Buffalo Bills. The Bills now 5-5. Josh Allen with his 11th interception on the season, threw 2 last night, and the turnovers doom Buffalo in a game that came down to an extra opportunity for the game-winning field goal on you could not write the script any better for those that buy into the NFL script writing, the conspiracies there. But you have the pass interference, sets up the field goal, 12 men on the field for Buffalo, extra field goal from 36 instead of 41, game winner 24-22. The Broncos leave with their 4th win, and Buffalo with a significant loss because the Bills now, Chad, after losing to Denver, they face the Jets coming up, and then they have that gauntlet. Yep. I mentioned last week, the gauntlet coming up after the Jets game this upcoming week, at Philadelphia, at Kansas City, home against Dallas, at Los Angeles with the Chargers, and then hosting the Patriots to finish off the year. Brutal stretch, and they needed to go 2-0 in this stretch, and they haven't been able to do it. And what's going to be a 6-day stretch here where it's pivotal that if they're going to get back into the playoff wildcard race, they're going to have to do it now on the road and in some tough environments and against the top teams right now in the NFL, Kansas City and Philly. And Josh Allen continues to say, I can't make these throws, can't make these mistakes. He continues to do it, and Buffalo isn't among the elite. And, Chad, they're a disappointment.
Huge disappointment. There's one NFL quarterback that has thrown 10-plus interceptions each of the last 4 years. It's a list of one. That one quarterback is Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen, who once again last night, and we're not even that deep into the season, he's already into double-digit interceptions on the year. This has been a train wreck for the Bills this year. A team I'm pretty sure I picked to go to the Super Bowl coming into the season. I think I had 49ers Bills in the Super Bowl. That's not looking good. The Bills' playoff hopes, quite frankly, look pretty bleak right now also. It has been a train wreck. I know they're dealing with defensive injuries, but it's been bad enough where they fired their offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey, earlier today. He's gone from Buffalo, and now they have 5 days to prepare for a game against the New York Jets, a game that will feature the 2 biggest disappointments in the NFL in 2023 thus far. The Jets have an excuse. Aaron Rodgers, their savior, tore his Achilles 3 plays into the season. That's their excuse. And Zach Wilson, let's go ahead and call it what it is. He's a bad quarterback. He's not an NFL quarterback. He took his place. The Jets were going nowhere. They've got their excuse. I don't know what the Bills' excuse is. at this point. It looks bad on Sean McDermott. It looks bad on Josh Allen earlier this year when he seemed very defeatist after a Bills loss and said, same old bleep, same stuff every time. Got to find a way to fix it. Starts with me, but it's the same bleep every time. That's becoming too common a refrain for this Bills team and for Josh Allen. Too many mistakes, 12 men on the field where you would have won the game. It's bad right now for Buffalo. And Hutton, this is a team that should be a lot better. The Jets coming into the season had tons of high hopes. We know why those hopes were dashed. They were dashed with Aaron Rodgers' Achilles. I don't know what the excuse is for the Buffalo Bills right now. This is a team that should be a lot better.
And now it sets up a Week 11 matchup against both of these teams, where the Jets have already had one win in Week 1. Now they have an opportunity to sweep the Bills and to stay in the playoff race, because the Bills are at 5-5, the Jets are at 4-5, and I think the winner of this still keeps some hope alive, where you've got Aaron Rodgers trying to come back by the middle of next month. And if he does that, where are the Jets standing in the playoff wild card race? And the Bills right now are staring down a wild card spot too, because of what we've seen with the Miami Dolphins in that division. Chad, no more than 6 losses for Buffalo since Josh Allen's rookie season.
Wow.
3-time champs in the AFC East right now, going into this year. They've been in the top 3 in scoring each of the last 3 seasons offensively. Right now they're 8th in scoring. They can score points and they can come back after turning the football over. But they've turned it over on the first play on offense twice now. They did it again last night. Josh Allen, of his 11 picks that leads the league, 7 of those are in the first half, and they face a deficit where they have to have the Superman-type performance. They're not getting that. They're not as explosive on offense, and they're not as good on defense. But what they're lacking is the quarterback savvy to not force some of these passes. And the one pick that he threw, I believe it was to Moreau, over the middle last night, was just that he's been throwing a lot of picks in recent years. He's not making those types of reads or poor mistakes that put the Bills, when they're in scoring range, not in a position to actually pick up points. And right now they're the 10 seed in the AFC.
Well, look, it's one of the, if not the best, one of the 3 or 4 best fan bases in the league, Buffalo Bills fans. I heard a lot of boo birds last night come out. I heard a 3 and out, and there were some loud boo birds. And that's not that's normal further east for state of New York teams. Happening in New Jersey, you hear the boo birds come out quickly. Not as quick for Buffalo Bills fans, who are remarkably loyal to an organization that has given them a lot of winning as of late, but has yet to win the ultimate prize that fan base desperately wants, and that is a Super Bowl title. And I heard some boos last night. That's telling. That's not telling for every fan base. That is telling for the Buffalo Bills. And that shows you, and I don't blame them, that they should be booed for losing at home to the Denver Broncos, and especially the way they lost it. But offense has got to be better. Josh Allen has to stop with the stupid mistakes. It's a team without any excuses.
You're right.
That's what's so sad about this for the Bills, is they just should be a lot better.
Yeah, and they were second in scoring last year, by the way, with Dorsey, who took over for Brian Daboll.
Yeah.
So it's not like Dorsey was awful last year, and now you have Sean McDermott trying to save the season at 5-5. Again, going against the stretch.
He's next, right? Well, this is step one. James Franklin fired his offensive coordinator midseason. That's always step one. Sam Pittman at Arkansas fires his offensive coordinator. That's the first step, and you know what's next. The owner is going to look at the head coach. The athletic director in college is then going to look at the head coach if things don't drastically improve. And Sean McDermott, who's been great for the Bills, ownership's going to be looking at him next. I don't know that he's in a lot of trouble right now, but they're going to look to Sean McDermott after he made this move with Ken Dorsey.
Well, I think that is really the next stage of kind of the media buzz and the fan chatter, because I would say at this time last year, we were starting to really pick up on the Mel Kiper top-rated quarterback and top-rated player. It was around this time, I believe, he put Will Levis number 1. And then the NFL draft cycle of Are they tanking, or certain teams going after certain quarterbacks? If you weren't talking about the playoff race, you were talking about the quarterbacks. This quarterback crop that's coming out of the college football realm, much better than last year. And it's going to be overshadowed by coaches that are feeling heat that normally don't feel that heat. And I would say don't face failure all that often. And I'm intrigued to see how these guys handle the pressure, because they've been very successful, and that's been the consistency of their tenure so far, wherever they've been. Instead of tanking, now it's about who's going to save their job, get fired, be traded, and who wants to be there as the head coach of said organization. It starts with Bill Belichick. That's why the narrative of, are we talking future draft? Are we talking who's going to coach next? You got Diana Rossini saying that there's going to be a mutual parting of ways this offseason between Belichick and Kraft. Orlovsky on ESPN is saying today that it's already been determined where Belichick's going to end up as the next head coach and general manager of his next team. Speculation is by the Chargers. He didn't say that, but that's the speculation. Chad, think about the list. Belichick. Now you have Mike Vrabel in the mix based on reports out of Boston, but also a team right now in Tennessee that could go with 3 wins. Exactly what they have right now could be what they end up with based on how this roster is made up. That's not out of the realm of possibility. Sean McDermott, who we're talking about. I don't think he's gone. But, Chad, I mean, again, disappointment, I'm with you. Because they faced the team that was the first half disappointment of the NFL in Denver. And now Denver is starting to pick up the pace. Russell Wilson's not turning it over. And their defense keeps you in games. So it's no longer about what Sean Payton's doing or not doing. It's now about the coaches who have been doing solid work. Keep going here. Todd Bowles, Matt Eberflus, throw in Matt LaFleur in Green Bay, Mike McCarthy, Brandon Staley, and do we mention Brian Daboll? Sure. He's getting extremely frustrated. He's talking to assistant coaches on the sideline about what and what's not working, and the communication just seems awful for the worst team in the NFL. It's not Chicago. The worst team right now are the New York Giants, based on what we saw last year to this year. And while I'm not sitting here saying that all of these coaches are on the hot seat to be fired, they're feeling pressure within the organization, and they're hearing chatter. And let me also mention Kevin Stefanski, not because of the record. They're 6-3 in Cleveland. I think he's done a solid job. I want to mention him just because of the odd way that this whole injury situation went down with Deshaun Watson. And trust me, Deshaun Watson is an NFL quarterback that has the NBA star power. If he doesn't want the coach there, the coach won't be there during the offseason. Chad, this is a lengthy group. And while we only see maybe 4, 5, 6 coaches turn over, we've already seen one. I'll mention Arthur Smith in there too, I should. But, yeah, I mean, there's a group here that, I mean, Vrabel's a great example. Ohio State. You know, his dad's a coach in high school, goes to Ohio State, becomes a star player there, makes his way to the NFL, has to work his way on his special teams, then becomes a starter, then goes to New England, becomes the All-Pro and the Super Bowl champion, traded to Kansas City. I mean, everywhere he's been, he's had that success. Even in coaching, he went to Ohio State. Even when he hasn't done well, he's not great as the defensive rankings for Houston when he was the coordinator, not great, but he fell forward into a head coaching job. And then they go to the AFC Championship game. There's been a lot of success there, and now the heat is starting to rise. And again, we lead it with Belichick. This is a list that going into the season, you wouldn't have expected to be this long in Week 11.
Well, and I want to go to the very top of that long list with Belichick and Vrabel. Bill Belichick, we've seen how he's going to handle this, and that is exactly the same way he's handled success, at least publicly. I mean, the answers coming out of him after he benched Mac Jones in Germany was, I thought we should make a change. Thought it was time for a change. That's all you're going to get out of Bill Belichick. He's not going to change. He's not going to suddenly start shouting at reporters or getting into it with everyone. The second name on that list, Mike Vrabel, keep a close eye on how he handles this failure this year, because that's a guy, like Hutton said, he's won as a player. He's synonymous with winning everywhere he's been. He won as the Titans coach in the start to his tenure. That guy's 3-13 now in his last 16, and he may not win another game the rest of the season. That record is going to look very lopsided over his last 20 games or so by the end of this season. And I'm not saying it's all on him. They fired a general manager a year ago, so we know where the Titans' ownership is placing the blame. Keep a close eye and ear on weekly press conferences featuring Mike Vrabel and how he handles this. My prediction is he's not going to handle it well. And I'm not saying that as a diss to Mike Vrabel. I don't think this guy's going to handle losing well at all.
He hates losing.
Everybody hates losing. I mean, that's, everybody handles it differently. I don't think he is going to outwardly handle it well when being questioned.
So, but it goes back to my thing. It's not about being fired or saving your job and that's it, or being traded. It's about who wants to be there. And that's also the tone that needs to be set.
Yeah.
And we'll find that out too. Crazy list. And it's got McCarthy. High expectations in Dallas. He's doing great. Not on the hot seat right now. But back-to-back 12-win seasons and no results other than division round playoff losses to San Francisco. Coming up, more headlines including Manning, Arch Manning, and the transfer portal. That's next.
Quote, a good state champion caliber high school boys team would smoke the best team in the WNBA. Then this weekend, after the video was posted and the critics, of course, came for him, he doubled down on what he said, posting this on X. Quote, it's sexist to say women's basketball players aren't as good as men's. That was a question, obviously. It's my opinion, and I'm putting $1 million behind it. If I'm wrong, the WNBA team can take my money and make more from one game than they do for the entire season. Okay, so let's get into this, because obviously there's a lot of people out there who are just assuming that Clay is being sexist, that he is trying to really punk the WNBA, because let's be honest, the ratings for the WNBA aren't great, which is exactly why Clay made the joke at the end of that. If you were to give them $1 million for losing the bet, that would be more than the WNBA would make regularly for one game under normal circumstances. But the fact remains that men and women biologically super different, and that's what he's talking about. We even look at a boys' high school basketball team and the makeup of their players, what they're able to do, their size, their skills, and look at the WNBA players who are oftentimes much older. They're professional basketball players, but still, the level of competition would not at all be on the same playing field. So, Chris, let's get into that. What is your take on this? The fact that people would say that, Clay, you're being sexist, when reality remains men and women, super different, even at very different ages, different places in their careers, there would be no matchup whatsoever.
I don't even think it's questionable. I love that Clay took it to him. I think a lot of times silence speaks louder than words. The Las Vegas Aces haven't said anything in response yet. Mm-hmm. So, look, you're right. I dug into the rosters, the Las Vegas Aces, and then, look, I've spent some time training at IMG Academy. I work with athletes at a school called Lou High, which is one of the top programs in the country. And we have guards 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". We're on the Aces. The tallest players are 6'3" and 6'4", and those are their bigs. So they don't even have anybody to really account for the bigs on the male teams. And I don't know that it's how in any way is this a sexist thing to say. Yeah.
Well, I have a woman, I think, who will be able to help answer this question. She is super smart. She's super intelligent. I am a big fan of her. Everybody, you're also a big fan of her. We all are. It just has to be said. So let's go ahead and bring in the woman of the hour, Riley Gaines. Hello, Riley. I'm happy to see you again. I feel like I get to spend so much time with you these days.
I know, right? Very good to see you, and I will say it is rainy here as well, which just sucks.
Okay, so are you, I know the last time we talked, you were like bouncing all over the place. Where are you right now?
I'm actually in Nashville, but headed to New York today, so. I'll be on deck.
Okay, well, welcome. You get to go from rain to rain.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, Riley, let's get into the topic that we were just discussing. Obviously, Clay being a little bit sarcastic in the way that he framed the question, but he's saying he's willing to make a bet that the WNBA champions, still being the champions, professional basketball players, would not be able to hold a candle to any high school boys basketball team in the country. Is he being sexist, or is he just speaking facts that men and women are very different in terms of what they are capable of athletically?
Boom. Right there. It's not sexist to say men and women are different. It, like you said, it's reality, it's truth, it's common sense, it's logic, it's reasoning. We all know it.
Sixth and Peabody, our location, with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Hot Mike with Hunter with our rolls on across the OutKick network. Coming up, we discuss coaches who have said, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving during race season. You know who else isn't leaving? Reports are, according to Inside Texas's Bobby Burton, that Quinn Ewers, quarterback for the Texas Longhorns, who returned this past week, way ahead of schedule, with the day-to-day status, week-to-week status, and he's back, says he's more than likely returning to the Longhorns in 2024. 90% is according to Burton's multiple sources, 90% certain that Ewers is back to play in 2024. So, what does this mean for the transfer portal? Yesterday we discussed this with Jimbo Fisher. Texas A&M has a ton of talent.
Yeah.
And the portal will be filled with a ton of talent from Texas A&M.
Well, job number one for the new A&M coach is to retain as much of that talent as possible.
Yes.
Is to re-recruit that roster.
And they're being recruited right now elsewhere, currently. We know that. Chad, the two quarterbacks for the Longhorns behind Ewers, what happens to them? And what happens to Arch Manning, who is, we know, scheduled to take over as Texas enters the SEC slate? He's going to have to beat out Murphy. But Arch Manning went to Texas for a reason, and it wasn't to be a backup. He's not backup caliber talent by any means. And he's the future of the Texas Longhorns quarterback spot. He's the franchise quarterback. What happens if Ewers is back? Because I think that's not an easy decision for Steve Sarkisian.
Look, I would agree. It's an awkward spot to be in because I don't think anyone thought Arch Manning was sitting more than 1 year. The plan was in place that seemed pretty clear cut. Quinn Ewers is the starter for a year, then you hand over the reins to Arch Manning after that. Now, our very own Kelly in Vegas with a little breaking news. When I asked the question on X whether or not Arch Manning was going to transfer, she responded and said, "My people in Texas tell me he's not as good as advertised." And that's an issue with the Texas coaching staff and that he's not going to be ready a year from now. So maybe some breaking news from Kelly in Vegas on that one. Look, I'll say this about Arch Manning, and this is me in defense of him. It's nearly impossible to be as good as he was advertised. Given his lineage, his family name, and the hype surrounding him, that kid as a high school athlete got as much hype as LeBron James did. There's not many comps you can point to and say, how famous is someone in high school as a prospect? It's LeBron James, it's Arch Manning. There's not many others you can put on that list.
Not many.
The pantheon of famous high school athletes that everyone knew about. So the pressure is big time for Arch Manning to deliver whenever he is the starter. I thought the situation was perfect for him to sit, learn for a year behind Quinn Ewers, then take over in Steve Sarkisian's offense. If Ewers comes back and Manning decides, I got to start playing immediately somewhere, a school that I'm thinking about schools that finished second and third for him in his original recruitment. Georgia is one possibility. Brock Vandergriff, I think, is the backup right now for Carson Beck. If Carson Beck is gone after this year, Maybe Georgia's an option. I know people are pointing to Alabama also as an option for Arch Manning.
List, yeah.
Definitely on his list as well. Those are two that I'd put close to the top. But this could end up being I don't know if uncomfortable is the right word. It could be an odd situation if Ewers comes back and Manning knows going into a season he's going to have to sit for his first 2 years in college. It seems like a lot to ask for a prospect that's a 5-star guy of his lineage.
And burn a year.
Of his believed ability, right, of what we think about Arch Manning and how great he could be, that he's going to have to sit for 2 years.
Well, if you go to Bama, I mean, Milroe's playing great.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, he's really improved over the last month or so, stepping up, and they're giving him more within the offense now. Slow. It's been a slow progression, but, I mean, Bama's right there with the most talented roster today playing in college football, based on what I've seen. They're gelling just like Georgia's been doing.
Yeah, I'm trying to see what year Milroe is. This is the crazy thing
his
about
third year.
transfer portal. Well, okay, and that's what's crazy about Arch Manning. If he sits another year, he may be the starter for 1 year and go pro. No one thought he was going to be there the full time. That's 3 years removed from high school. He may get 1 year as a starter at Texas and then bolt if Quinn Ewers comes back.
Yeah, he's a red shirt. No, excuse me, he's a sophomore. He played, so he attempted 2 passes or completed 3 passes in 21. And then last year, 31 of 53, and then this year, of course, he's the main starter.
It's almost impossible to follow what year anyone is anymore with the COVID
years. Yeah, I know.
And transfers and red shirts and everything else. I look at when could they go pro? How many years are left of eligibility on everyone?
What about this, though? So, and again, I think when Ewers says he's coming back, he mentioned 90% on this report, it means it's referencing Texas, likely to return next year, right? What if Ewers hits the portal and not Manning?
That could be a great option for someone looking to upgrade a quarterback for a 1-year stint if he were to bolt. I don't see that happening. I think if Quinn Ewers is coming back, he's coming back to Texas. Now, I say that he originally went to Ohio State from the state of Texas and then transferred to Texas. It would not be completely unbecoming of Quinn Ewers to want to transfer again. He's already done it once. But
and look around the SEC. There's a lot of quarterbacks. He's coming back to Texas. A lot of quarterbacks who have transferred for their final year of college to take over.
Yeah.
I don't throw that out of the realm of possibility either, because what's the pressure on Sarkisian to have Manning ready to go at Texas? And who Manning has recruited?
I think the pressure's on Sarkisian to get to a playoff.
Yeah.
And to win at the highest level. So if Quinn Ewers if you want to recruit Quinn Ewers to come back for 1 more year because you know he gives you the best chance, that's what you're doing if you're Steve Sarkisian.
And you want that going into the first year.
When Arch Manning finally is the starter, if it's next year or the year after, the pressure is then on both Arch Manning and Steve Sarkisian to show, hey, you can trust me with your great quarterback talent because I didn't lead Arch Manning astray. When he started in my offense, he was terrific, and he was a high draft pick. That's what you're hoping for with him at that point. So then you can sell the next quarterback for Texas and Steve Sarkisian as you can be Arch Manning. Or in this case, you could be Quinn Ewers.
And what's the recruitment process from Arch Manning if he enters the portal?
I don't think there will be one.
Oh, I mean.
I really believe.
That brand alone.
As careful, though, as that family was protecting his privacy and his recruitment the first go-around, and how difficult it was to get information on any of it, and how they would take his phone from him because he was getting hit up by so many people for interviews and coaches calling and everything else. Hutton, I think when he makes that decision, he knows exactly where he's going. I don't think there's going to be visits. I think it is going to be Arch Manning is leaving Texas to go to Georgia or Alabama or wherever.
I've got another one for you. Texas A&M.
I don't know. It depends on who the new coach would be.
Right.
He would need some sort of
storyline, though.
to him.
That would be incredible.
Did he? I feel like he didn't really give LSU much of a chance. It wasn't much Brian Kelly there by the time he was leaving.
That's a good one too. Yeah.
So, but he's from New Orleans. I look at that offense and what Daniels is doing, and he's going to be gone, and think maybe that would be a possibility for Arch as well. Look, right now he's at Texas, all speculation at this point. But if Quinn Ewers comes back, I got a hard time believing Arch Manning is going to sit on the bench for 2 years before he's a starter.
And Murphy, too.
And I don't know, honestly, in today's college football, it's one thing if you're a 3-star developmental quarterback. Why would any 5-star sit for multiple years? You're going somewhere where you have been promised the keys to the castle by year 2. That is the plan. You got a plan. When you're a 5-star guy and you know the amount of effort and NIL that goes into getting a 5-star quarterback of all positions, there is a plan in place. It is not, hey, young man, just get here and work your tail off and you'll be able to start by your senior year or your junior year. No. I'm the guy by year 2. That's the expectation for these 5-star guys.
And you enter the portal and you get paid again.
Right. Or you go to Alabama and they stockpile 3 or 4 5-star guys and 2 of them end up transferring.
Right.
I'm amazed at times that when quarterbacks commit, I'm thinking, did you look at the depth chart or how long someone was going to be there? Some of these guys, if your goal is to play, there are places you can go and play a lot quicker that are good programs if you just looked at it more carefully than places some of these guys go. I think the days of, sitting around until your junior year to start at quarterback, if you're a top-notch prospect, that's over. Because all these guys, they know everything now. There's no mystery about it. You know where you were ranked in your recruiting class. You know the schools that are after you, that were after you, that would be again. You know everything. The knowledge that these players have is so much more. I don't think that's always a great thing for the sport, but for their autonomy, it's a good thing. So they know more and more about what they can do and where they could go. They're not going to sit around for multiple years.
I'll just mention, too, just because of the Texas tie, and Oklahoma has a senior quarterback currently, and Dylan Gabriel. Chad, Jim Harbaugh, he's headed to the hearing. He's headed to discuss the situation at Michigan, trying to find the temporary restraining order and coach on the sideline this weekend against Maryland. And I know you think he gets it. He ends up getting the judge to grant this based on the suspension from the Big Ten and Tony Petitti. I mean, they were certain they were going to get this last weekend. And I think the timing of everything screwed them up with when Petitti announced this. Now they've had a full week to prepare their argument. And if Harbaugh is, as passionate and dropping one-liners like he has been this week in press conferences, who knows what he's liable to say to this judge in a passionate plea to get him back on the sideline. Well, as he says, hey, prove that I've ordered the code red, as he's playing Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men. And,
the guy's impervious to sickness even, I think, is one of his claims.
Oh, yeah. So here's Jim Harbaugh discussing if he's feeling a little under the weather and how he's going to be ready for Friday no matter what.
Yeah, I don't know what I have, some kind of virus or something. Trainer told me, but I'm not sick. Feel great. Got a tremendous workout in today. Thank you, Coach Sean Lockwood, for that. I'm the iron wall that viruses bash against and shatter. But yeah, something's going on there. But just work it out, get it worked out, work it out of the system. Do some more push-ups. Eat an apple.
Do more push-ups, eat an apple. The iron wall that viruses bash up against and shatter against. Now, that's stealing a line from Kevin Costner as John Dutton from Yellowstone, who, when running for governor of Montana, said something like, I am not progress, I am the wall that progress shatters against. So he's clearly a Yellowstone. He's a Sheridan-verse fan. No big surprise there with Jim Harbaugh. Now I'll ask you this question. The guy who says that I need to do some more push-ups and eat an apple and talks about being impervious to viruses the way he does. Do we think that guy's going to go into a court of law after having said in that same press conference that he wants to be Tom Cruise in A Few Good Men in this courtroom setting, and that he's going to get there and not say one thing incriminating that could be bad for their case against the NCAA? All this stuff is on the record, obviously. I think you are playing with fire if you are Michigan and you're bringing Jim Harbaugh to that courtroom to say whatever he wants on this. Maybe he pulls it off beautifully and does not incriminate himself or his program in any way, and he's both thoughtful and entertaining. I would be very nervous if I was Michigan about what Harbaugh is going to say in this hearing.
Well, we'll ask Amy Dash coming up about what will be asked, but mainly their argument is
he doesn't know.
Well, not only that, but the suspension has been handed down before the investigation has been completed. Yeah. So until you can show evidence that it links back to our coach, who's sitting right here next to me, then there shouldn't be a suspension. And you're causing harm to our program by doing this when there's a process that we're going through with the NCAA that's ongoing.
Did I read this correctly, too, that it was one judge that teaches law classes at Michigan that was originally going to see it, and then it got passed to a Michigan grad that's a judge, and then I think it got passed back. This is why there was so much back and forth on Saturday. Then they threw it back to the Michigan law professor that's now going to see the case. So regardless, you've got someone with strong ties to Michigan that is a judge that is going to hear this case. Jim Harbaugh said yesterday, I don't want it to be a popularity contest. I just want to be able to defend myself and fight for due process in this whole thing, which they don't feel like they were afforded at Michigan. Now, Tony Petitti is going to come back and say, we've got the evidence that shows what was going on at Michigan. And while there isn't evidence right now saying that you absolutely knew, we have the authority within our office to find a punishment for the program, and this is what we decided. You as the head of the program had to be suspended, regardless if we had any text proof or anything that you definitely knew about it. That's going to be the argument back. We'll see who wins. My guess, the Michigan Law School professor sides with Michigan, and he gets his temporary restraining order.
Coming up,
just a hunch.
Coaches who have said they're not interested in the Texas A&M job. Who might be? Plus NFL overreaction. It's Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation. And pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
Is it fair for people to be upset with Barbie?
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose. I mean, what have you seen firsthand of how this has affected you in the plant and your fellow employees? Under Joe Biden, the Taliban has retaken Afghanistan. Putin has invaded Ukraine. So if there was ever a time for freaking aliens to inhabit and conquer Earth, now would be that time.
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human being. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
I made the call to end the Me Too movement. And today I'm going to continue making that case. And that's just a way to further taunt these women, to make them feel less than, to make them realize that this has just become a big joke. Deion Sanders is the Donald Trump of football.
We were directly impacted by the whole Leah Thomas thing, and we were able to see you guys on the ground with your signs supporting That was huge.
They were saying, oh, it's only 1 or 2. That's rubbish, and we all know that's rubbish. Once those trans-identifying males were able to succeed, it just encouraged others.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. A bold taste of a Southern legend.
Hot Mic with Henry with our rolls on across the OutKick network. Glad you're with us. You can join Chad in the chat right now on YouTube. Search out OutKick. How's it going so far over there?
I've had better days in the chat.
Oh, wow.
A little bit down on the chat.
Trolls today?
Chat. Well, the people who chat, we've reached the point of, like, if we say the word Michigan,
you
know, they're all getting real pissy about it. Oh, Michigan again. Oh, here we go. Michigan's taking over the show. And I'm like, guys, it's the biggest story in the country. We're going to continue talking about Michigan, so deal with it.
Another massive story is at Texas A&M.
That's
with
another
Jimbo
big
Fisher out and the massive buyout of $77 million.
Give it 2 more days, then someone in the chat's be like, oh, A&M again. Oh.
Well,
they're just whiny today. It's okay. They'll get with it.
It is Ray's season for college football coaches. Dan Lanning got his after 1 year at Oregon. And whenever that was announced, it was like, what? You're already extending the guy through 28? $20 million buyout if he chose to leave for another school. And it's a contract that pays him $7 million annually. He was asked about whether or not he was interested in the Texas A&M job, because I certainly would pick up the phone and call him. A&M's going to call anybody. And Lanning said no, he's not interested. Zero chance that he leaves the Oregon Ducks football program. He says he has everything that he wants right there in Eugene. And he told reporters, I'm not going anywhere. There's zero chance that I would be coaching somewhere else. I've got unfinished business here. We have the resources, the tools. Anybody that can't understand why you would want to be at this place doesn't understand exactly what exists here. 19-4 overall now in his second season at Oregon. 37 years old, and that's the currently 6th in the college football playoff rankings. Second place Pac-12 and headed to the Big Ten.
I respect the heck out of that from Dan Lanning. From this perspective, the dude is being honest. He's not playing a game. He could have very easily skirted that question and said something like, I am just focused on this year's team and these kids in the locker room and done all that. And you say that knowing that your agent is working behind the scenes to play your current university to get a raise, even if you want to stay, with Texas A&M. So, look, I know agents and coaches play this game all the time, and they're simply doing it to get even more absurd amount of money than they already are. But I appreciate Dan Lanning for being so obvious about it. I saw a number of people say when he said this that, of course you wouldn't leave Oregon for Texas A&M. There's no amount of money to go to A&M and be miserable, acting like it's a miserable experience to be the Texas A&M coach. I've seen a lot of that sentiment. I don't know that I fully understand that, other than people have been beaten over the head with Jimbo Fisher, who seems miserable, and his experience in A&M has seemed miserable for everyone involved, simply because he didn't win to the level he should have won. So I don't know that A&M's some miserable place that you wouldn't want to leave for all that money.
I just think the general public views that job in a much different way than the coach will. That job is a top-tier job to coaches, because you have all resources necessary at your disposal. And you're going to get paid, your staff's going to get paid, players are going to get paid. You're going to get whatever you want there. And I think the viewpoint from the outside looking in is, oh, what have they done? What have they won? They couldn't win with Jimbo Fisher. Why would you want to go there? Now, they get the wrong players that are being recruited. You don't want to go there. Look at what you're doing here and what has been done in College Station. Instead of, can you do everything you possibly can do or want to do as a head coach in College Station for the Texas A&M Aggies? The answer is absolutely yes, with the finances and resources.
Yeah.
And that's what the coaches are looking for. That's how they judge these jobs.
They judge it that way. And also, I think that there's going to be a recalibration of expectation across the SEC. They're about to move to 9 conference games and not 8. That's going to change a lot of programs' win trajectory by 1. You're probably going to win 1 less game a year than what you're accustomed to. I think that with every job but Kirby Smart at Georgia, Nick Saban at Alabama, probably Brian Kelly at LSU is going to get in that territory also. I think there's a lot of other jobs that there's almost going to be this NFL level of expectation. And what I mean by that is if you can get over 500 and substantially over 500 in some case, that's a great season. And I think that everybody's looking at the SEC saying, now, wait a minute, Texas, Oklahoma coming in, that makes it harder on the A&M coach, no doubt. That is a detriment to A&M. They're no longer the lone SEC dog in the state of Texas. They're going to have to recruit more against Texas in that conference. And then I think you look at 9 conference games, the win-loss record is going to start to look different for some of these coaches and some of these programs. And they just immediately think, well, those jobs are tough. And they're not wrong. It's the toughest conference in college football. It is going to get tougher when you're playing more conference games. But I don't get the level of disappointment in A&M as a job from people. I think it's a very good job with enormous resources where you can win in a big way. I think it's kind of an odd place personally, having spent a little bit of time there, but knowing the whole setup, that's something that would take some getting used to, and maybe it takes a specific type of personality to jive with the culture and the whole vibe of College Station and that school. But it's a good job. I don't understand when people act like it's not a good job, and it's a very good job.
It's viewed as a great job with coaches, though, internally. There's just a discussion. And also, while you're facing one more loss on a record, while I agree it should be viewed that way, it will not be viewed that way by the fan bases. Because you can win 6 or 7 games, but how long can you win 6 or 7 games and sustain your job? Not 3 years, right? I think the length of where you to determine success is about the same because of the 12-team playoff, not the 4. And that extra loss keeps you out instead of getting in on. And now they're potentially they're discussing the 5-7 model instead of the 6-6, where you have 7 at large and the 5 conference champions. So again, that gives
that's a big win for the SEC,
and that's a loss for coaches that want to think that they can lose one and sustain that same type of praise and recognition and continue to get paid. But hey, and also just quick props to Oregon. This is the one success version of this where they do the early extension, and they got ahead of all this mess instead of bidding against A&M now. It's hard to project that, but other schools are now going to try to do the same thing, and many of them will fail, and we'll be back in this rut of buyouts. But, Chad, Oregon's keeping their coach, and, I mean, he's the first coach that had denied that he was interested in the job.
I want to get into the buyout part of this.
We've got that.
Another big we got to have more time to talk about it. I think it's a crime what's going on with college athletic directors, and they've allowed it to happen now, and now you are going to have open season on coaches threatening to move if they don't get the same buyout that they're going to be offered somewhere else, and it's a shame.
Just threatening to do it.
I think the whole thing's a shame. That's why I want to applaud Dan Lanning for getting out ahead of it and not giving any room to breathe. There is no doubt. He said it right there. He's a flat-out liar if he decided to leave now. I am absolutely coming back. I'm not going anywhere. Good for him for speaking with his heart on that and not playing some cat and mouse game of trying to get another raise from Oregon and flirting with other jobs. Good for Dan Lanning. I wish more coaches showed that level of integrity and were that honest about it. Problem is, big-time agents are running the sport right now, and in some cases, they're ruining athletic departments with buyout money. We'll get into it more another time. By the way, quickly, Rick Neuheisel, the name he threw out for A&M, Dabo Swinney. That it may be time for him to want to get out of Clemson with people doubting him there and start something new. That would be something, to go from Jimbo Fisher to Dabo Swinney.
It would be something for him to embrace what they're doing there with their roster, too.
Dabo Swinney seems like the type that would like the yell leaders also. Like, I think he's goofy enough to get behind that. The dude,
the 12th man.
The dude in the overalls doing the 12th man stuff and the silly cheers.
Yeah.
That seems
Midnight
like
yell.
Dabo's speed.
So, craziness in the NFL. The Broncos win, get their 4th win, and now we see the Bills at 5-5. It's time for NFL Overreaction.
All right, guys, getting us started last night, Monday Night Football came down. As you guys remember, the Bills were my NFL eliminator team, so I got the X on that one, but we'll just start. A lot of the talk's been about the Buffalo Bills, but let's talk about the Denver Broncos. They've been able to string together some really good performances, and we've seen Russell Wilson actually take that step forward under Sean Payton. So I pose to you, the Denver Broncos are making the playoffs.
No, they're not. And it's because of what they didn't do in the first half of the season. A lot of people think first half doesn't matter, and you get on a run and you go. Right now, just looking at the NFL playoff picture ahead of them, the Bills remain ahead of them, and the Bills have the Jets in a big playoff matchup, a potential wild card spot with Aaron Rodgers coming back and trying to stay alive. The Bills don't need their 6th loss in back-to-back losses to Denver and to the Jets. But, Chad, the Chargers, and let's see, who else is ahead of Denver? Indianapolis and Cincinnati. Plus, if it's not Cincinnati, it would end up being Houston or Pittsburgh or Cleveland, because they're going to battle each other, and then they'll be the first team out. I don't think Denver has a chance based on the fact that there are teams that are better than Denver, more consistent than Denver, and are able to do more explosive plays offensively to keep them in the playoff race longer than the Broncos will be.
That win-loss record looks better now for Denver, so kudos to Sean Payton for turning that around. I still watch that team, and just call it just the eye test or whatever. They still kind of suck to me. When I watch them play, I still think this team is not a good NFL team. I don't know what they're doing to win some of these games. It's good defense. I'm aware of that, but I don't think they're a playoff team, no. I think that's an overreaction.
Some of Wilson's throws were incredible last night. Against pressure.
Well, the play that upon review was the catch on the side of the end zone.
Fantastic.
That was dropped into a bucket and a great catch.
Cortland Sutton on that one. Guys, we'll stick with the AFC West. And the Las Vegas Raiders, they've been able to rattle off 2 wins in a row, but they're going to make Antonio Pierce their full-time head coach.
I'm going to say that's an overreaction because Jim Harbaugh is going to be their next coach. I think the more that Jim Harbaugh starts to act like a deity at Michigan and the way they treat him as such, the chances are he's probably going to stay at Michigan the longer this thing goes on, because he has become a martyr for the Michigan Wolverines, and he's being treated like a god by Michigan fans in that university, so he may end up staying. But my money is still on Jim Harbaugh leaving for the NFL, and he's going to be the Raiders' next coach.
I'm going to say no. This is an overreaction because of the other coaches that are going to be available. And we're talking potentially anyone from Dayball to McDermott. We mentioned Belichick and Vrabel earlier. You've got LaFleur and McCarthy. No. There's too many coaches on the hot seat that will be available, and also coaches that will be re-interviewed, let's say. And I think Chad's onto something there as well with Harbaugh wanting to get to the NFL.
No, I agree with you. And plus, I mean, those 2 wins come against the Giants and the Jets. So beating the teams in New York, not too much to write home about. I will say, though, they'll have an opportunity, or Pierce will have an opportunity, because he's got at the Dolphins versus the Chiefs and versus the Vikings coming up. 3 teams all definitely. And then the Chargers, then the Chiefs again. So difficult schedule coming up. Moving right along, though. Last week, the conversation was about the New Orleans Saints and winning the NFC South. I'm going to switch it up, but the Tampa Bay Bucks are actually going to be the team that wins the NFC South.
Overreaction. I still think, Chad, it's New Orleans because of their defense and because of the fact that I think Derek Carr is going to have to – he's able to go 3 games throwing 300-plus yards. The Tampa defense, prior to last week, is giving up 350, 250 yards, 300-plus yards, and then 470 yards passing. That can continue. Meanwhile, you're not doing that against the New Orleans Saints defense.
How does Jameis Winston, every time he's about to go into a game for injury or whatever it may be, always has a look like someone just shined a spotlight on his face in the sideline? Like, it's always this look like, oh, here we go. I have a real hard time even watching this division or being interested with any of these teams. Right. Insignificant is a great word to describe the entirety of the NFC South. All of these teams, I don't see really heading in a clear direction, and I don't like any of them this season. But by default, I think it's still the Saints division to win. I haven't seen enough with Tampa to think they're going to win it. And definitely the Falcons are completely falling apart right now. So give me the Saints.
Top headlines of this Tuesday. Plus, we will look ahead a bit to
thank you, Davey.
What's going to be a great NFL weekend. John McClain coming up in about 25 minutes. Stay tuned. Hot Mike with Ed and Withrow rolls on across the OutKick network.
Dabo Swinney ripping his own fans. Dabo Swinney at Clemson is, I don't know, they tell me that he's the guy that doesn't like the transfer portal because he's made some comments that weren't exactly supportive of it. Dabo Swinney has done a job at Clemson that very few thought could be done. Clemson is a town about this big. Well, I better do this, not that, because that's like a white power sign idiots say. But it's about that big. The state is South Carolina. The state is not Clemson. So, but Dabo Swinney put Clemson in rarefied air. If you, a couple years ago, were going to name me the 3 best college football teams before Georgia's run here, you'd say Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. That's kind of who it always came down to. It felt like. So Dabo Swinney is now the victim of something that is good in one way, but it's bad in another. Incredible expectations of your fan base, meaning 10-2 ain't good enough. It just ain't. You can say whatever you want, but it just ain't. We got to be better. What? We're not in the college football playoff? What? We're not winning a national champion? What? We're 4-2? That's only winning 67% of our games? Here's what Dabo had to say. If you don't go undefeated, people say you're losers, that you're terrible. Let me tell you something. This is why football coaches for years and years and years and years fought the college football playoff. We're at a point in time, and I hate that, where people, if you don't go undefeated, you're losers. You're terrible. It's just a terrible mindset. Honestly, maybe we need to lose a few games and lighten up the bandwagon. Sometimes the bandwagon get a little full. That's the one good thing about going through a little bit of so-called adversity, is that you really find out who's with you and who's not. That's all crap. Let me explain to you Dabo Swinney's day, can I? Dabo Swinney probably wakes up around 5:30. Dabo Swinney smokes shit, shower, shave, shampoo, goes to the office. Probably has a meeting at 7. Dabo Swinney then is probably in different meetings with players or recruits, or maybe the administration, and maybe watching film, whatever. Then he has practice. Then after practice, he's doing the same thing. Then in the evening, he's making phone calls. Probably goes home around 10. At no point in time in his day, his week, his month, his year, is he finding out who's with us and who's not with us. It's not like there's a list. Now, maybe you find out what media member wants to rip you, but on a daily basis, a monthly basis, you're not finding out any of this crap. It's very simple. Coaches, if you want to know who's with you, understand that when you lose, nobody's really with you. If you want to know who's really with you, win. And then everybody's really with you. It's literally that simple. As my father used to say to me, Dan, we're with you, win or tie, and we ain't so sure about the tie. So shut up with that stuff. Win some football games and don't sweat it. Seriously, do yourself a favor. Work hard, grab yourself a glass of wine, go sit in your chair and read a book instead of being on social media or worrying about who is with you and who is not with you.
Just like that, the second hour is here. Hot Mic with Untitled Withrow rolls on this Tuesday edition here on the OutKick Network. Hope you'll join us on the YouTube live stream right now. You can jump in the chat.
Chat's picked up. I chastised the chat. I whipped him into shape, and it's better now.
Sometimes
a lot more
that.
positivity.
Sometimes it takes that.
You know, we can be negative on this show. We're honest with our emotions, whether it be positive or negative. So I understand that negativity can infect the chat at times, but I just thought the chat was a little too negative today. Why do they have to be so negative is what I was asking. Everything was very negative, but we're back now. You know, it's a little case of the Tuesdays going on. We're not quite to the weekend yet, which starts on Thursday on this show. People are feeling a little bit. They're in their feels, their emotions a little too much. We're starting to come out of it now, Hutton, so the chat's much better.
Jack, coming up, we've got
John
McClain in 20 minutes. We'll talk all the NFL headlines, including Bills losing, Broncos winning, and C.J. Stroud and Joshua Dobbs being the talk among the NFL quarterbacks currently. Some big matchups going into Week 11 as well. Plus, Amy Dash, the Odyssey legal insider, gives us perspective on what we should be expecting as Michigan and Jim Harbaugh will petition and head to a hearing on Friday to find a temporary restraining order in order to get Harbaugh coaching and not serving the 3-game suspension.
Can we just call her our legal expert also?
Sure.
She is the one we go to for legal advice.
Yeah, she's the first call.
So she's always our first call on this show. So she's the Hot Mic legal advisor as well.
And Jim Nagy joins us, the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, gives us the latest on the top players in college football, what to expect down the stretch, and who to keep an eye on for the upcoming NFL draft. Time for the top headlines today on this Tuesday edition. Scorched Earth, Hot Mic with Untitled Withrow. We start with the arrest and charge of Matt Petgrave, who's been charged with manslaughter in the death of former NHL player Adam Johnson. If you remember this story, this was late last month. Adam Johnson, former NHL player, he's playing for Nottingham, and was killed, died, when a skate blade cut his throat. And the blade kicks up, cuts his throat, and now they've arrested Petgrave based on possible and based on manslaughter charges and the fact that maybe this was intentional. That was the assumption as well by many, the opinion by many coming out of this. I'm not watching this video, but people who have say, yeah, this is something that stemmed from Petgrave with Johnson, and it ends up with Johnson dying, and now Petgrave being charged with manslaughter.
I'm with you. I can't watch it knowing how it ends and the result of all of it. So I have not seen it, but I've read the description of his skate coming up when I guess he's kind of falling down, and his skate comes up. I don't know how you could prove this is anything other than just an awful, awful mistake. This stuff gets thrown around a lot. We'll be watching a football game, a sporting event, and saying someone should charge that guy with a crime, right? Someone that sucker punches someone in a fight, takes a huge swing or an elbow at someone that could have done some really bad harm, bad hits, dirty hits in football. They should charge that guy with a crime. That never happens. That almost never happens, right? That you actually see a sporting event that turns into a criminal case because of something that happens in the line of play. And we're talking about on the ice, on the field, not fights that happen after a game, before a game. I'm not talking about Michigan and Michigan State brawling in the tunnel. I'm talking about actions that take place during the game. It seems to me very difficult to prove that an action that takes place within the game that could be an accident but look like it was egregious. I don't know how they're going to prove that. I don't know the UK court system. I don't know what the standard of proof is there and all of that, but feels like it's going to be pretty hard to prove that this was something that was done on purpose.
Well,
terrible story.
Yeah, that now heads to the legal system there, and here the discussion with the NHL is about more gear, taking the proper safety precautions on what you can wear, as far as a guard or what is the turtleneck type thing that they could put on. Some players are for it. Goalies want less gear, just because of the movement aspect of things. So that will pick up. Other leagues have already started that, and the NHL has already said they've talked about this, about how to take proper precautions of this happening, the potential of it. I said at the time, Chad, I don't know how it doesn't happen more often with the sharp
I'm with
blade.
you. It's and not typically because you see guys that sell out to block a shot that are on the ice, laid out on the ice, that you don't see someone step over them or slice them with a skate
or get tripped and fall.
Isn't one time enough to want to have that protection of the rubber turtleneck or whatever protection they're going to put on for people's necks?
Think so.
I don't. That's look, tougher people than me play ice hockey. I understand that, but I hear that story and I think, okay, yeah, that's not too much to ask for me to wear this thing that would protect me from getting my carotid artery slit by an ice skate. I think I might want to do that. One time seems like too much for that to happen.
Yeah, and it happened late last month, and here we are, November 14th. And
with the charge coming down.
Right, yeah. Jimbo Fisher fired. He's out for the Texas A&M Aggies head football coaching position. And the buyout is extraordinary. $77 million. It's triple the top amount we had seen, which is Gus Malzahn at Auburn, at around $22 million. And keep in mind, that's what, I'm just throwing this in, that's what Dan Lanning's buyout is the second most, roughly, second most compared to what we're discussing with Jimbo Fisher getting paid $77 million. And I mentioned every day until this buyout is paid, he will earn $26,000, $26,300 per day throughout this process of paying it off. I believe it's over, 8 years is what they'll pay off, and quite a bit of it's due within the next 40 days or something. It's crazy. And I mentioned, Chad, whenever we had on we've had many guests on about NIL, name, image, likeness, the hearings on Capitol Hill. Senator Tommy Tuberville even joined us, and I mentioned the coaching buyout money. That is where the athletic departments are not able to make budget. That's where they're looking back and crying poor, and it's why they don't want the current players, the athletes, to account for more on average than about 9% of their budget, because these buyouts for coaches, the payments made to administrators, and settlements that have been made to assistant coaches and staff members, 42 to 45% of their budget on average in the Power Five goes to paying that, not to the players. And they continue to do this on an annual basis, and we will continue to see this with the merry-go-round that is raise season for coaching.
And raise season needs to go away. It's got to go away. And it's only going to take almost a level of collusion from athletic departments to say, we're not going to do this. We're not going to tamper with coaches who are under contract. We're going to have a 2-year ceasefire with this, and we're going to try to get our books in order and not have the possibility of people leaving under contracts. Take an NFL approach to this. It's not going to happen because it is dog eat dog. It is kill or be killed. It's all of those things in college sports, and you can't get all these powerful people to agree to a ceasefire that way, to where guys aren't jumping around and using other jobs to get raises at their current job, or using the threat of something to get these just asinine buyouts for guys who did not do their job. Jimbo Fisher failed at his job, and Jimbo Fisher is set to make, this from Front Office Sports, in the next 60 days, he will make $19.4 million in a payout. Within 120 days, he will make $7.27 more million. Then he will make $7.27 million annually, 2025 through 2031. Bobby Bonilla would like a word. He's actually jealous of those payouts until 2031. You could solve world hunger if you took Jimbo Fisher's buyout and gave that to feed the poor across the world. That is ridiculous. Jimbo Fisher should be ashamed of himself. I don't know how you look someone flat in the face that's struggling right now to make ends meet, and you're Jimbo Fisher, and you're saying, I'm making $7.27 million to not win enough football games and to sit on my butt and do nothing. It is a crime of the athletic department that signed that in, the AD who did it. It is ridiculous. It has to end. It must end. Hutton is right. What they're trying to do in college sports by arguing that we're cash strapped, we're this and that. You can't argue it when you do that. Now, I also don't think that you should take $19.4 million this first payment or $7.27 million and give it to all the athletes. I don't think they're worth that, quite frankly. That's a hell of a lot of money. And we're talking about someone who did not win that's getting paid that money to walk away and not work. It's crazy.
Well,
it's got to stop.
I don't mind the money going to the coaches and players, because if it doesn't go to them, it's going to the networks and the executives that are running things behind the scenes. And that's what they also want to keep as the money goes up. But, Chad, how much was Tennessee fined?
I want money to go to people that are working, though. This is my problem with the buyouts. I don't want the money going to Jimbo Fisher after he's been fired. If you think Jimbo Fisher's worth $10 million a year, pay him. I'm fine with that. People argue Nick Saban's underpaid at whatever he makes, $11 million. Great. I want no buyout for people who fail at their job. I think if you fail at your job and you don't win enough, I want to eliminate all buyouts for that. You're gone. We're firing you, and we'll pay you the rest of this year or whatever we owe you, and then we're done at that point. I think that is where it's gotten insane to me, are people getting paid to fail.
Paid to fail, but also if you already realize that you're going to be paying him anyway, then you move on if you've got the boosters ready to pay it. That's the other thing that sucks.
This is not me saying they shouldn't have fired him. I'm saying signing that contract with that buyout was a crime. That's the crazy part of all this.
Well, but I don't blame Jimbo Fisher for signing it.
Of course not. I mean, he's robbing them right now of money. Like, yeah, he gets a huge benefit here. I blame Texas A&M for doing that. And I blame every other AD that's paying coaches who have failed. Tons of money. What
Texas A&M is doing, though, is not what the average school is doing, or even the next best program that's paying big buyouts.
No, but there are too many schools that are paying multiple coaches right now.
Yes,
and multiple coaches that did not win, that got fired because of a lack of production, that didn't do the job they were hired to do.
So what they have, there is no offset language either in this buyout. So, I mean, if you think about just what this means across college athletics, it means, well, you've got a situation where the next coach that comes in, how does Texas A&M handle that contract? But also, if you're a coach, you want to be named as a coach that they're interested in. Because now you have to keep up with the Joneses. Do you want to keep your coach that Texas A&M is interested in? If you do, you have to pony up a bit. And Oregon's giving an extension to Dan Lanning after 1 year. 1 year on the job, and he's getting extended. There are coaches that are, Chad, we saw this last year. Shane Beamer is getting extended. I mean, look at what Lane Kiffin's done. Flirting with any job that comes open. Miami 1 year. Now you've got last year Auburn. And Ole Miss is paying their coach over $9 million a season. I never would have thought that.
Look, if the market is, I think the market's out of control too. But if you're paying Lane Kiffin $9 million to coach Ole Miss football, and he's succeeding, and you feel like he's bringing in enough revenue where it's worth it, I'm okay with that. I hate how the threat of leaving or doing something else isn't just give me a raise. It's also add this many years to it and give me this much more money if I suck. Let's go ahead and add a couple more zeros. If I happen to suck over the next 3 years and you want to fire me 3 years into the 7-year extension, then you're going to owe me that much more money. That's the part I would love for athletic directors to eliminate. If you want to pay someone $10 million because they win a ton and you don't feel like anyone else would do that good of a job and you want to pay them $10 million, I'm okay to pay someone $10 million to do their job and do it well and win at the highest level. I am not okay with paying someone $77 million to fail. They failed, and now we got to pay them this much money. That is a terrible decision by an athletic department to sign into a contract like that. I hope it goes away. But, I can hope in one hand and do something else in the other. And then one will fill up faster than the other, right?
Think about this.
I don't know that it's going away anytime soon.
No. Think about this, too. Tennessee was fined, $8 million, the largest fine?
Yeah.
For punishment of NCAA policy?
They basically had to pay their buyout. They weren't paying Jeremy Pruitt back to the NCAA.
$8 million is...
Which still cost them that money.
So the buyout for Jeremy Pruitt was $8 million. The buyout for the assistant coaches on Jimbo's staff is $8 million. That's what they're going to be paying. $8 million.
It's crazy.
to buy them out.
I saw where Dan Dockage said, first thing I would do is give at least $1 million to all of my assistant coaches if I'm Jimbo Fisher of that buyout money for dragging them through that also and giving them a little parting gift as well of the $77 million. I doubt he does that because he also helped negotiate, I'm sure, that buyout for them if they were to get fired.
Sure. So Dan Lanning says he's not interested. He's not leaving Oregon. Dion is saying he's not going anywhere, which makes sense if they're going to deny a transfer for Shedeur, and he's going to be playing through entering the draft in 25, and Shiloh. Also, doesn't sound like we're going to see the craziness of Dan Campbell leaving Detroit with the Lions to go to his alma mater where he played for A&M. Is there a no-brainer for Texas A&M right now that takes that gig that you're after immediately?
I would have said after the win over Clemson in the start of the season, Mike Elko at Duke, who's been at A&M before, would have been a no-brainer, but they've struggled. They've had a quarterback injury also with Riley Leonard. I don't know that there is a no-brainer right now. And listen to Billy Lucci yesterday. He threw out Billy Napier as a comp, that they're going to go get kind of a Billy Napier level coach to be their next coach.
Unless there is a Brian Kelly level coach that wants to leave where they are. There will be plenty of names and plenty of raises.
Dabo Swinney, according to Rick Neuheisel.
Imagine Dabo embracing all that money.
Oh.
John McClain joins us next.
Quote, a good state champion caliber high school boys team would smoke the best team in the WNBA. Then this weekend, after the video was posted and the critics, of course, came for him, he doubled down on what he said, posting this on X. Quote, it's sexist to say women's basketball players aren't as good as men's. That was a question, obviously. It's my opinion, and I'm putting $1 million behind it. If I'm wrong, the WNBA team can take my money and make more from one game than they do for the entire season. Okay, so let's get into this because obviously there's a lot of people out there who are just assuming that Clay is being sexist, that he is trying to really punk the WNBA because let's be honest, the ratings for the WNBA aren't great, which is exactly why Clay made the joke at the end of that. If you were to give them $1 million for losing the bet, that would be more than the WNBA would make regularly for one game under normal circumstances. But the fact remains that men and women biologically super different, and that's what he's talking about. We even look at a boys' high school basketball team and the makeup of their players, what they're able to do, their size, their skills, and look at the WNBA players who are oftentimes much older. They're professional basketball players, but still, the level of competition would not at all be on the same playing field. So, Chris, let's get into that. What is your take on this? The fact that people would say that, Clay, you're being sexist, when reality remains men and women, super different, even at very different ages, different places in their careers, there would be no matchup whatsoever.
I don't even think it's questionable. I love that Clay took it to him. I think a lot of times silence speaks louder than words. The Las Vegas Aces haven't said anything in response yet. Mm-hmm. So, look, you're right. I dug into the rosters, the Las Vegas Aces, and then, look, I've spent some time training at IMG Academy. I work with athletes at a school called Lou High, which is one of the top programs in the country. And we have guards 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". We're on the Aces. The tallest players are 6'3" and 6'4", and those are their bigs. So they don't even have anybody to really account for the bigs on the male teams. And I don't know that it's how in any way is this a sexist
question
thing to say. Yeah.
Well, I have a woman, I think, who will be able to help answer this question. She is super smart. She's super intelligent. I am a big fan of her. Everybody, you're also a big fan of her. We all are. It just has to be said. So let's go ahead and bring in the woman of the hour, Riley Gaines. Hello, Riley. I'm happy to see you again. I feel like I get to spend so much time with you these days.
I know, right? Very good to see you, and I will say it is rainy here as well, which just sucks.
Okay, so are you, I know the last time we talked, you were like bouncing all over the place. Where are you right now?
I'm actually in Nashville, but headed to New York today. So I'll be on deck.
Okay, well, welcome. You get to go from rain to rain.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So Riley, let's get into the topic that we were just discussing. Obviously, Clay being a little bit sarcastic in the way that he framed the question, but he's saying he's willing to make a bet that the WNBA champions, still being the champions, professional basketball players, would not be able to hold a candle to any high school boys basketball team in the country. Is he being sexist, or is he just speaking facts that men and women are very different in terms of what they are capable of athletically?
Boom, right there. It's not sexist to say men and women are different. It, like you said, it's reality, it's truth, it's common sense, it's logic, it's reasoning. We all know it.
Sixth and Peabody, our location with the Hot Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Glad you're with us for Hot Mic with Hunt and Withrow across the OutKick Network. How about the Bills? Losers of 4 of their last 6.
How about having 12 men on the field
5 and 5
on a last-second field goal that misses that would have won you the game, and then giving it to them 5 yards closer to then end the game with a field goal? That is a brutal way to lose a football game.
John McClain joins us. SportsRadio610.com is where you can find him. He's covered the league for 5 decades. John, the Bills on the disappointment list at 5 and 5. They haven't lost more than 6 games since Josh Allen's rookie season. We know the expectations and how this roster is built. What has happened to Buffalo in 2023?
When I heard today there was breaking news on the Bills, I thought they were going to fire their special teams coach, not offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey, although he'd been under a lot of criticism since being elevated from quarterback coach when Brian Dable went to the Giants. And they were a team that did not look well coached. They had turnovers. They ran the ball great, but they got away from the run. They just don't look well coached. And that's not something that we could say under McDermott. They're wasting Josh Allen's career. I just think they're doing a really bad job. And what is weird to me, if the playoffs started today, the Texans would be in and the Bengals and the Bills would be out.
What is Josh Allen doing, though, forcing some of these passes on a weekly basis? Now, 11 picks, 7 of them in the first half. And while not every interception is the same, some of them are just based on defense dropping back, and he's throwing to the wrong spot. And that's something we haven't seen from him over the last 3 years.
One of the things is when he came into the NFL as a first-round pick from Wyoming, he had the reputation, great arm, that threw a lot of interceptions. And one of the reasons is when you got a great arm, you tend to have too much confidence in it. You try to throw it into coverage. You have balls, you throw it too hard. They ricochet off the receiver's hands and to the defense. And one of the interceptions wasn't his fault, but he has not been producing consistently like he did. They're able to run the ball. A back they let get away, Devin Singletary, who started for him the last 3.5 years, came to the Texans, and he rushed for 150 yards on 30 carries in the victory at Cincinnati. So they have not gotten the balance, consistent balance that they should have. And Josh Allen is a turnover machine. They've got to coach him better.
Coaching at many spots right now doesn't look great. I'm not saying every coach is legitimately on the hot seat here, John. What I am saying is they're feeling some pressure and heat from the inside and out. And I'm curious to see your take on how you think these coaches handle it over the backstretch of the season. Belichick, Vrabel.
Hot seat.
Vrabel.
No
hot seat. Just how they handle the pressure. Vrabel.
No, handle.
We've got
Belichick's going to handle the pressure the way he always does.
And
by mumbling. So pressure's not going to get to him. I mean, he's going through his worst season since 2000, his first year there, when Brady sat on the bench, and then he had a terrible record in his time at Cleveland. So he's been through adversity before, but everybody thinks he's gone after the season. They'll call it a mutual parting of the ways.
And how about Dan Orlovsky saying that from what he's heard from multiple people is that there's already a setup done where Belichick will be the GM and head coach at another spot next year?
Boy, I can't imagine. Number one, he's going to be 72 years old. Would you want to give him total control where he doesn't have a quarterback? He's got to have a quarterback who can take a beating mentally from him every day. It wore out Tom Brady, and he left for Tampa. He's got to get his kind of players in there. You don't do that overnight. The only owner I could see doing that, now I know Mike Florio's talked about Washington, but I think Martin Davis, because it'd be funny, wouldn't it? Belichick goes to the Raiders, and Tom Brady's one of his bosses as a minority partner.
You mentioned
he could come down and berate him every day after work.
You mentioned the quarterback that's got to take the beating from him, but also I would say from just the defense. The only example I can come up with there, Chargers. Would he be a fit there based on, I mean, they've got the quarterback in place, and we know that Spanos wants to become the team of Los Angeles, even though the Rams are that team.
One thing that Bill Belichick has proved is he can't win without Brady. You want to give him a 5-year deal at $20 million a year, which is what he's supposed to be making in New England. I don't think it's going to be easy for him to get a job, knowing how he has to have total control of everything. He needs control of the pens and the paper clips and everything. He's going to want to bring in his people and clean house with everybody. I just don't think teams are going to line up to get him like some people seem to think.
And you're saying that even if he's just a general manager and not a head coach?
Yeah, I don't think he's done well with personnel at all.
Okay.
He's lost a lot of good personnel people, Nick Caserio being the last one, and they don't have a lot of talent. You look what they've done since Caserio left. What's impressed anybody? Nada.
John, if the season was over today, is C.J. Stroud Offensive Rookie of the Year and DeMeco Ryans Coach of the Year in the NFL?
A lot of people are talking about Dan Campbell. He can end up with the best record in the NFC, but they started that last year. They had a great turnaround, won the last game at Green Bay, didn't make the playoffs, but they were kind of a fan favorite coming in. And DeMeco Ryans, based on they won 3 games last year, I'm partial because I've known him since he played. I think he would. Nobody's done a better coaching job. And the voters tend to take teams who turn around teams. Stroud's run away with the offensive player. Now I see all these people nationally talking about him being in the MVP race. Hadn't been a non-quarterback, hadn't been a rookie to be MVP since Jim Brown in 1957. I don't think that's happening. And I'm writing a column today for sportsradio610.com. People talking about Stroud and Ryans. What about Caserio, Executive of the Year? He's the one that's brought in all these players, overseen the draft, brought in DeMeco Ryans. He'd deserve a little love, too.
And the Texans have a legitimate chance of winning the AFC South. And I would think that even the most optimistic Texans person wouldn't have expected this. There's always surprises in the NFL, but how shocked are you, John, that they're in this position right now with C.J. Stroud as a rookie quarterback, given the lack of leadership over the last few years with this franchise and where their roster was, where you could see some light at the end of the tunnel, but are you shocked they're as good as they are right now?
No, I'm not shocked. I'm flabbergasted. And I had them win 6 games, doubling their win total last year. I thought maybe they would be in the wild card competition next year when they had a chance to win 9 games. Nobody had any idea that Stroud would be as great as he is. The first rookie to engineer back-to-back come from behind victories in the last 2 minutes. Texans are the first team since 98 Colts to have a 350 passer, a 150 receiver, and a 150 rusher. Just all kind of things going on. Stroud has been magnificent. He's been coached really well by Bobby Slowick, who came with DeMeco Ryans from the 49ers. And their defense has gone, and Derrick Henry will want to hear this. They've gone from allowing 170 yards a game rushing, and Derrick Henry's been a big reason for that, being the worst run defense in the league over the last 4 years. Now they're number 8, allowing 91 yards, and it's been getting better by the week. So everybody is astonished.
With all due respect to Jim Harbaugh, America's team is not the Michigan Wolverines right now. It's the Minnesota Vikings because of Josh Dobbs and that story. And now that he's 2-0, having just joined the team. John, my question is this on Dobbs. I keep expecting him to regress to the mean. He hasn't done that yet through 2 games. Is this simply another Jeremy Lin and Linsanity happening for a very short period of time? Or is this the start of something longer, where Josh Dobbs becomes a multi-year NFL starter because of him finally getting a decent opportunity to be a starting quarterback in the NFL?
Well, there's only one America's team, and it ain't the Vikings. And Dobbs, he's bounced all over the league like a pinball machine. You guys know he'd only won 1 game and he didn't start the first one, so he just won his 2nd game as a starter. They're obviously coaching him well. Wade Phillips' son, Wes, is a coordinator. Kevin came with Kevin O'Connell from the Rams. Kevin's doing a great job as the play caller. And you got to think defenses, once coordinators see enough tape, they'll find ways to combat him. But it's one of the all-time great stories, what he's been able to do. And you like to see good people have great success, and he's having it. They've won 5 in a row. Who needs Kirk Cousins? Who needs Justin Jefferson? They're doing all this without him. And you talk about a legitimate candidate for Coach of the Year. Kevin O'Connell last year won 13 games as a rookie. He didn't get the award then. Now he might win 9 or 10 and get it this year.
Yeah, I mentioned yesterday, there's a handful of coaches recently here in Nashville with Dobbs, Arizona, short notice with Dobbs, who acquired him. He played, they didn't win. And now O'Connell's playing them on short notice and getting back-to-back wins. John, the results of Week 10 have set up some interesting matchups that didn't look great for Week 11 a week ago. Bengals-Ravens on Thursday night, I just thought both teams would win. Both teams lose. And now we have Thursday Night Football. That's a solid matchup no matter what. Steelers and Browns in Cleveland, both teams 6-3. We've got Vikings on the road against Denver for Sunday Night Football. That's got plenty of storylines there based on what the recent teams have done. And then, of course, Chiefs-Eagles on Monday night is a great week capper. So solid games with playoff implications where I didn't really see this 7 days ago.
It's about time because, boy, these primetime games the last week were dog games. I feel sorry for the Germans, taking them with what they had to see with the Patriots and the Colts. And it's getting that time. And I heard Tom Brady had C.J. Stroud with him on Let's Go last night on Sirius. And he told him, he said, the season doesn't really get started till the middle of November when all the, let's see, I was going to say nut cutting. Can I say nut cutting? I just said it twice. When all the nut cutting starts. And that's a fact. He said, not what you do in September and October, November, December, now early January. And these games are going to have far-reaching implications, and I can't wait. I'm having fun covering the Texans again. It's been a while. They've got Arizona. Then they play Jacksonville, who they beat by 20 in Jacksonville. And then they play Denver 3 in a row at home. So it's a good time for them to make a move if indeed they're going to do it.
Did Deshaun Watson make a move in that second half to block in now? Do you think we see consistency from that position and from him paired with that solid defense in Cleveland?
He was in a boot after the game because of his ankle. He's just getting beaten up a lot. They say you can tell when he throws. His shoulder's an issue. So I'm going to say no. I'm going to say he's still going to be up and down physically, but their defense is so good. And their running game with Jerome Ford is not as good as Nick Chubb, but it's still formidable because they've got a great offensive line and that run-first philosophy, and that's good for a quarterback, even one with a bad ankle and a bad shoulder.
And as we just look at some of the wins, Seattle with a big win. I think we've overshadowed that with the game-winning drive by Geno Smith. After Washington took the lead late, they're able to keep pace with the win-loss record after San Francisco boat races Jacksonville.
Yeah, I need them. Even though I picked Baltimore to win the Super Bowl, I need Seattle to do it because I was in Vegas. I took them 66-1. So if they win the Super Bowl, I'm gonna make some money.
Hey, and let's wrap up with this. Buffalo now playing the Jets, and then they have the Chiefs and the Eagles on the road. They'll face the Cowboys at home in that 3-game stretch after they face the Jets. This is the stretch where Buffalo makes it or they don't. And if they don't, Sean McDermott's going to feel heat. I'm just putting him out there too, even though, again, it's pressure, not necessarily fired.
How in the world did they just annihilate the Dolphins early in the season when Miami was super hot? Just blew them away. I thought at that time 49ers were unbeaten. Buffalo had lost the game, but just obliterated the best offense in football. I'm thinking those are the two teams leading contenders for the Super Bowl. And now with Buffalo, not so much.
John, always great. Great to catch up with you. Have a great rest of the week. Enjoy Week 11.
Jonathan and Chad, like you guys, have a great Week 11 as well.
You're the man, John McClain. Thank you, sir.
SportsRadio610.com is where you can find John McClain on social at McClain_on_.
Both a gentleman and a scholar, that John McClain.
That's right. That's right. Coming up, are we on the bus or off the bus with Michigan winning without Jim Harbaugh? Go 6-0 without him, potentially. Kyler Murray as the future, the franchise of the Arizona Cardinals. Would we have said that a week ago compared to what we may answer with now? Plus, James Franklin and his future at Penn State. It's all straight ahead. Hot Mic with Hunter Withrow rolls on across the OutKick network.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation. And pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number 1 overall pick.
Is it fair for people to be upset with Barbie?
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose. I mean, what have you seen firsthand of how this has affected you in the plant and your fellow employees? Under Joe Biden, the Taliban has retaken Afghanistan. Putin has invaded Ukraine. So if there was ever a time for freaking aliens to inhabit and conquer Earth, now would be that time.
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human being. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
I made the call to end the Me Too movement. And today I'm going to continue making that case. And that's just a way to further taunt these women, to make them feel less than, to make them realize that this has just become a big joke. Deion Sanders is the Donald Trump of football.
We were directly impacted by the whole Leah Thomas thing, and we were able to see you guys on the ground with your signs supporting. That was huge.
They were saying, oh, it's only 1 or 2. That's rubbish, and we all know that's rubbish. Once those trans-identifying males were able to succeed, it just encouraged others.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. A bold taste of a Southern legend.
Coming up, Amy Dash will join us, Odyssey's legal insider, our legal insider for Hot Mic. Dive into the legalities of what Michigan is going to say and make their case for on behalf of Jim Harbaugh, who will be in attendance on Friday for the hearing, where he hopes to coach against Maryland, then against Ohio State. I can't stop thinking about the Ryan Day needs to beat Michigan. This was the topic all offseason. We had the potential of them meeting up for the championship game last year.
Yeah.
And
kind of rooting for that.
Just knowing that there's no hot seat, but there's a hot seat. You see what I'm saying? And then what's at stake here for Ryan Day against Harbaugh in a couple of weeks? Again, we've got plenty of time to dissect it, but that's the storyline. Because we saw how, he was angry at Lou Holtz for saying his team wasn't physical. We've seen your team not physical. It was against Michigan in back-to-back years.
Well, and what you've essentially done now is poke the bear with Michigan. Because now you have truly galvanized them the rest of the way, where they feel like it's everyone against them, and they're the only ones that are on the side of good in this. They've convinced themselves that, in fact, the perpetrators of the illegal activity are the victims in this case. And they believe that. Yes. They think they're the ones being unfairly, taken out of college football. So it's going to be interesting when those two teams get together. And Jim Harbaugh and everyone's going to have that team convinced it was Ohio State that led this investigation and did this to you.
Oh, hey.
And you get them at home in Ann Arbor. I can't wait.
Chad, and also, I'm anticipating something leaked that week on Ohio State by Michigan. Again.
Probably.
To just stir it up again. That will be another storyline to wait for. They're not going to leak anything on Maryland, are they?
Well, they have essentially said in their statement.
You imagine they would just rogue on Maryland?
They don't care. Yeah, Maryland can do whatever they want. They're not concerned with Maryland. They even put the warning out there. Mind your P's and Q's, coaches, because now a new precedent has been set. And I look forward to the Big Ten administering the same penalty when we find you doing something illegal.
They went Dan Snyder.
Yeah, I've got the tapes. I've got the recordings.
Rams are expecting Matthew Stafford to return to the starting lineup on Sunday. Battered and bruised. He's in individual drills. He's had that right thumb injury. And the Rams play the Seahawks on Sunday. That's always been a crazy series. 8 games, 8 touchdowns, 7 interceptions for Stafford. And I looked up his contract here. They don't have a potential out with this deal until 2026 because I didn't know what the future could hold for Stafford. But keep in mind, the reports were last offseason, they did listen to discussion about some potential trade options. They let it be known quietly that they would be listening.
And I have no idea why I didn't think about this right away when this job came open, but I just saw this and had to mention it.
Okay.
If you're Mississippi State, would you hire Dan Mullen back?
See, I saw this. I put a text into him about whether or not we would come on and discuss it.
I saw that and I thought, man, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Dan Mullen was a god there.
Oh, he did a great job there.
He had them number 1 in the country with Dak Prescott.
He also he had them in a position where they were winning enough where he never would have lost his job. Right? I feel like he was a lifer. He's almost like Mark Stoops at Kentucky. it feels like he's done well enough that he's never really in trouble at Mississippi State. When he finally left for Florida, he just wanted to try to elevate to the next step. Why not just bring him back? Is that the reason you fire Zach Arnett before his first full season is done? Because you know you can bring him back.
Well, why would you have to fire him early, though? Because you think Zach Arnett and Mississippi State's going to start winning games?
Maybe.
Have we ever
anyway, I saw that.
Have we seen that before?
There's like a light bulb moment. I'm like, oh, yeah, duh. That would make a lot of sense.
Have you seen a stat or a year where we have had a game that featured two coaches that were fired just right after the game? Where they played?
That's a good question.
I don't
I'd have to
recall
go
that.
back. I can't immediately off the top of my head think of one that's happened.
Yeah. It didn't matter going into the game for either coach what happened in that game. They were gone.
It was a 51-13 final.
And it did not help Jimbo Fisher.
A&M, by the way, warmed up a dude that had a Max Johnson undershirt on that was a lefty throwing that was not Max Johnson. Completely as a diversion. He was not able to play with an injury. And they had a guy, so Mississippi State could see it, on the opposite side of the field with Johnson, number 14, on his jersey. And he was a lefty, and he was like a GA or a staffer that they just put out there to try to throw Mississippi State off.
That's Friday Night Lights-esque.
Thinking he was going to play.
Time to go on the bus or off the bus. Here's Davey Hudson. Where are we headed?
All right, guys. We started at this location last week. We're going to go back, but we're going to be in Buffalo, New York. And the Buffalo Bills will actually miss the NFL playoffs.
Chad, I say yes. Because, not just because of Josh Allen. They're not as good on defense. They turn the football over, yes, because of Josh Allen, but they have 18 turnovers on the season now. 11 of those are interceptions. And we don't see the same explosive plays from the Buffalo offense. I'm going to say yes, and it's also because of the AFC North. They're going to beat up on each other, but I also think when they play the non-divisional games, those teams continue to win. And while they may not get 4 teams in for the first time ever, I think the first team out will be from the North and not from the East.
I'm on the bus of them not making the playoffs. This is a team that has taken an early season approach. We got to fix this. We can't continue to do this. I don't know why we keep doing this, from Josh Allen to proceeding to do it week after week with the stupid mistakes, with the turnovers, everything else. So I don't think they're fixing it. Yeah, I think this is a team that's not making the playoffs. And then the schedule. At Philly,
it's the schedule, but
they get a late bye. At KC, Cowboys, at the Chargers, at the Dolphins. That's all remaining on this schedule.
Yeah.
They're not going to the playoffs.
Also, I'm on the bus with them missing it because Joe Brady's now the offensive coordinator. They've already switched this up. And Brady was great with Burrow at LSU. He was, of course, a disaster with Carolina. Now he's the quarterback's coach turned offensive coordinator. That's what Dorsey was to Dayball. This is a mess. And all of this kind of started with a weird dynamic between Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Remember, he was at the mandatory minicamp, but he wasn't, but he was. And now they're 5-5. It's they're off.
I'm with you.
The vibe's not there.
Not happening.
That's a good pull in on the Joe Brady stuff. I was trying to think back to how bad of a time he had in Carolina, and it was rough. Yeah, glad I'm not a fan of that.
Not Matt Rule's best moment in his career either was with the Carolina years, the time in Charlotte.
Carolina fans would gladly forget those years. But guys,
Yes.
we're going to head on, and speaking of going back to Joe Brady's days in college, we're actually, I don't even know, that's a terrible tie-in. We're going to State College. We're going to Happy Valley in Pennsylvania. Our next one, James Franklin's the head coach at Penn State in 2025.
Yeah, I think he is. I think he's going to probably flirt with some other job at some point and convince the people at Penn State again of his worth, because they're going to be convinced he could leave for somewhere else. He probably will be able to leave for somewhere else if he wanted to. I think for 2 more years, that would get him through 12 years at Penn State at that point. I think that they're going to be okay with the 2 or 3 losses, and that's about where they're going to be for the next 2 years. So I'm going to say he's going to be around for that long.
So it comes down to, is he going to beat Washington and, the rotating schedule now of Washington, Oregon, and USC, UCLA. So their schedule next year, just to go into 2025, and this is what Davey's getting at. At Wisconsin, Ohio State, Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland. I'm going to say, and they're at USC. I'm going to say yes. I think Aller gets better. I think Franklin's the head coach in 2025, and believe it or not, I think he probably gets a raise based on that, because I think they're exactly where they are this year, and it sucks to say that's where Penn State is. And also, where they are right now, they're fighting to stay alive for the 12-team playoff, and that helps Franklin boost his overall perception of what he's capable of.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how the 12-team playoff impacts the raises and extensions that you guys were talking about earlier, because, you just tell them, like, hey, all we got to do is make the 12-team playoff, and we got a chance to go win it all. So it's like, I've got it here once. Surely I can do it again. But, a team that actually has a really good chance of just making the 4-team playoff, it's Michigan. So we're going to go to Ann Arbor for our next stop on the bus, and Michigan will go 6-0 without Jim Harbaugh on the sidelines.
Let's just keep the bus rolling. I'm on the bus with this. Yes. They're going to win their next 2, and they're going to roll straight through, because without Jim Harbaugh, if he's not allowed to coach, they've got McCarthy that's running things. That's the key. He stabilizes everything from the quarterback position. And, he can have Moore cry all he wants to on the sideline, Chad. I'm on the bus with the fact they would go 6-0 without him.
I think that they are going to go 6-0 if they don't have him. I think he's going to be back for Maryland. I think this Michigan Wolverine judge is going to rule for Michigan, and he'll be back on the sidelines for those 2 games. I still think they would go 6-0 even without him. I also think they're going to get steamrolled by an SEC opponent in the playoff. I think that's how this season's going to end. I don't think you can run it 27 straight times against a Georgia or an Alabama and hope to win the way they did against Penn State. But, yes, I think that they are going to go 6-0. And I don't know what to think of that in terms of Jim Harbaugh and his overall worth, that there's no drop-off when he's not on the sideline for games.
Well, I mean, the worth is he's been extremely dominant, right? The worth Tennessee would miss Josh Heupel so much more.
Yeah.
But
I could say that about a lot of different programs,
but
how much they
what
miss
I
their
can't
head coach.
say is Tennessee's at Michigan's level right now in wins, losses, and success. That can change. Maybe it doesn't. But what Harbaugh's done is something that many coaches who don't necessarily call plays have not been able to do. There's clear value there, and the team has complete buy-in with him. Everyone's loyal to Jim Harbaugh. It's amazing.
I don't see him losing to Ryan Day again. So I'm with you guys. I'm going to keep the bus rolling. We're going to travel through the nation's heartland, and we're going to go make a trip down to Phoenix, Arizona. I think you guys were in Phoenix.
Going right through the heartland. I like that. Kansas, Oklahoma. It's perfect.
God's country.
But we're going to take our attention and shift it to the NFL. We got to see him this past weekend, but Kyler Murray is Arizona's starting quarterback at the beginning of next season.
On the bus with this, Chad. Kyler Murray's their guy. He was their guy last year before
you weren't
the season
impressed with Clayton Tune in his tune-up performance?
No.
Now, I will say they took him to use the tush push and took a lot of people's Kyler Murray touchdown away. So
I'm on the bus with this because they're risking $90 million in an injury deal and a guaranteed money by playing him this year, when they could have just kept him on the sidelines and then traded him this offseason if they could find a trade partner. I'm on the bus with the fact that, Bidwell, that's the quarterback for them. They've already paid him.
Yeah, I think I'm on the bus too, shockingly. They've got the Call of Duty situation figured out. I think he's playing less of that. So I think he's their franchise quarterback now moving forward. And I also think when you see his ability, the scramble he had in that game and the big play on the final drive, I think if you're Jonathan Gannon and a new coach that's with him now, or anyone else you convince yourself, I'm the one who can make this work. Because that is an ability that not many people on earth have, that he has. So I think they believe they're going to make it work. I'm on the bus. He's the quarterback.
Hey, let's also say pump the brakes on the praise for him, because they were playing Atlanta. Anyone that's been playing Atlanta,
they've had success.
They play at Houston this upcoming Sunday. But yes, Murray's the quarterback.
All right, guys, and finally we're going to end in Los Angeles. Caleb Williams doesn't go number 1 overall in this year's draft.
I'm off the bus on this. Even with all my reservations about Caleb Williams, I still believe there's going to be a lot of talk about guys, rocketing up the board and going down and bad interviews and S2 cognitive tests. I think when we end up on draft night, it's still going to end up being Caleb Williams number 1 overall.
Yeah, someone's trading up for him, even if someone holds the pick that doesn't need their franchise quarterback, and there are plenty of teams that do. Caleb Williams he's the prospect, and he'll win someone over that absolutely loves him. I'm off the bus as well.
Just have lots of fingernail polish remover. Whatever team drafts him. That's all. That's the only advice I'm going to give you.
Legal analyst Amy Dash next on Michigan.
Dabo Swinney ripping his own fans. Dabo Swinney at Clemson is, I don't know, they tell me that he's the guy that doesn't like the transfer portal because he's made some comments that weren't exactly supportive of it. Dabo Swinney has done a job at Clemson that very few thought could be done. Clemson is a town about this big. Well, I better do this, not that, because that's like a white power sign idiots say. But it's about that big. The state is South Carolina. The state is not Clemson. But Dabo Swinney put Clemson in rarefied air. If you, a couple years ago, were going to name me the 3 best college football teams before Georgia's run here, you'd say Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. That's kind of who it always came down to. It felt like. So Dabo Swinney is now the victim of something that is good in one way, but it's bad in another. Incredible expectations of your fan base, meaning 10-2 ain't good enough. It just ain't. You can say whatever you want, but it just ain't. We got to be better. What? We're not in the college football playoff? What? We're not winning a national champion? What? We're 4-2? That's only winning 67% of our games? Here's what Dabo had to say. If you don't go undefeated, people say you're losers, that you're terrible. Let me tell you something. This is why football coaches for years and years and years and years fought the college football playoff. We're at a point in time, and I hate that, where people, if you don't go undefeated, you're losers. You're terrible. It's just a terrible mindset. Honestly, maybe we need to lose a few games and lighten up the bandwagon. Sometimes the bandwagon get a little full. That's the one good thing about going through a little bit of so-called adversity, is that you really find out who's with you and who's not. That's all crap. Let me explain to you Dabo Swinney's day, can I? Dabo Swinney probably wakes up around 5:30. Dabo Swinney smokes shit, shower, shave, shampoo, goes to the office. Probably has a meeting at 7. Dabo Swinney then is probably in different meetings with players or recruits, or maybe the administration, going and maybe watching film, whatever. Then he has practice. Then after practice, he's doing the same thing. Then in the evening, he's making phone calls. Probably goes home around 10. At no point in time in his day, his week, his month, his year, is he finding out who's with us and who's not with us. It's not like there's a list. Now, maybe you find out what media member wants to rip you, but on a daily basis, a monthly basis, you're not finding out any of this crap. It's very simple. Coaches, if you want to know who's with you, understand that when you lose, nobody's really with you. If you want to know who's really with you, win. And then everybody's really with you. It's literally that simple. As my father used to say to me, Dan, we're with you, win or tie, and we ain't so sure about the tie. So shut up with that stuff, win some football games, and don't sweat it. Seriously, do yourself a favor. Work hard, grab yourself a glass of wine, go sit in your chair, and read a book instead of being on social media or worrying about who is with you and who is not with you.
Just like that, the final hour is here on the Tuesday edition. Hot Mic with Hutton with Rowe. across the OutKick network. Rolls on from 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer. And
Week is rolling on,
Oh,
Hutton.
Smoky Moonshine. Yes, it is.
It's going fast.
Yes, it is. Plenty to get to over the next hour here to get you through your workday. We've got Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, joins us weekly. We'll scout the top players across college football and discuss what's at stake over the final 3 weeks here and what we could be seeing for the NFL draft and how they can help themselves and who's caught his staff side. They've got 18 different scouts out each and every weekend at the top college games. We start the hour, though, with Amy Dash, Odyssey's legal insider. And Amy, we said earlier, we would like to say just you're our go-to legal insider. Is that fair?
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Am I getting a contract?
Yes. Our lawyers will be in touch. It's easy for you since you are a legal expert. Yeah. I feel like you're probably a lot of people's legal analyst and expert. I think you're probably a lot of people's go-to for all legal advice, right?
A lot of people. I had to narrow it down. I was becoming too popular. But I remember that when I was living in the city, when I was much younger than I am now, and I had to negotiate an apartment lease, the other side said to me that it wasn't the Empire State Building, so I should really calm down.
Well, we appreciate you keeping us on your list. After you trim that list, that we're still on the short list, that we can call you and get your advice. Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
Amy, can you just Cliff Notes version here of what should we be expecting on Friday for Michigan, Jim Harbaugh, and what they're presenting in front of this judge in hopes that they have a temporary restraining order and Harbaugh's on the sideline as Michigan takes on Maryland this weekend?
So there'll be oral arguments from both sides. It's unclear if Jim will be allowed to testify. He said in a lot of articles that he's eager to testify. I'd say that would normally require a more extensive hearing on a preliminary injunction. But really, I think it's going to come down to whether the judge believes that the bylaws were followed by the conference. And we can get more into that in follow-up. But I think just to answer your initial question, what there is to expect is that people are going to be presenting evidence on both sides. And so what Jim and his lawyers are going to want to present is that he could suffer immediate and irreparable injury that would not be able to be fixed if he is not allowed to coach in the game of the weekend and subsequently thereon. So the other side's going to have to show that, no, there's not going to be reputational damage. There's not going to be irreparable harm because the outcome of sporting events are traditionally felt to be too speculative. In other words, if one player or one coach is not participating, most courts will say it wouldn't harm the outcome because there's just simply too many factors at play over whether a team wins or loses. So Jim's going to have to make the opposite argument that Michigan is reliant upon him. And we can talk more about that. There are some things that will help him. There are some things that will hurt him. He's also going to have to make the argument that his due process rights have been irreparably harmed and that it's not in the public interest for the university or for other universities in the future to have to face this type of a punishment prior to the NCAA deciding on their investigation results and their punishments, so that it was just too swift of a punishment.
So within the bylaw, the broad aspect of the sportsmanship policy, does that certainly helps Tony Petitti in the Big Ten, but given the fact that there's another ongoing investigation by the governing body of the NCAA, does that help Jim Harbaugh in Michigan more?
Well, that's going to be the determining factor. It's going to come down to whether the judge believes that the bylaws were followed. And as you mentioned, there is a conflict between the laws because the Big Ten has this sportsmanship policy that does give broad discretion to the commissioners punished for up to 2 games. So you may have struggled there, basically for anything that affects the integrity and the competition. But then you have Rule 32 of the Big Ten handbook, which outlines a totally different procedure that some may say conflicts with the sportsmanship policy, whereby Rule 32 says that once the NCAA starts an investigation, the conference is really supposed to wait until that investigation is over, and punishment should be decided first by the NCAA, and then specifically it says the conference would issue its own punishments after the NCAA. So which rule here prevails? Which one trumps the other is going to be the big question.
And do you think that is going to be Michigan's main point, that Rule 32 that you highlighted, that, hey, the NCAA investigation started, so you should wait until it's over? Will this thing fall on the judge's interpretation of that part of the bylaw?
Well, if they're smart enough to make that argument, which I think they are, then yes, I think that's what it's going to fall upon. But then, of course, it's going to be clouded by all of these other considerations because there's a multi-prong assessment here by the judge where it's not just what are the laws and are they being followed. It's also, is there a harm here to the public interest? Is it more likely than not that there will be irreparable and immediate harm to the university or to Jim? I think where it gets a little tricky is that they seem to be going in with the dominant argument that Michigan is going to suffer. And like I said, in the past, courts just feels too speculative to decide that whether a coach participates or not would harm the outcome of a sporting event. Also, you have the fact that he's allowed to prepare the team. So while he can't coach during the game, he hasn't completely been stripped of his coaching responsibilities. So that's going to hurt that argument. Yeah. A better argument is the individual argument that Jim's reputation will be harmed. But again, in the past, it hasn't held water for most athletes, so it's probably not going to for a coach. Plus, you have another investigation into Jim. So the other side would just argue, well, his reputation's already on the line here because he's at risk of being charged as a repeat violator anyway for the recruiting during COVID investigation. And
Michigan's already self-imposed a 3-game suspension for him where the rules are set up the same. He could coach during the week, not on game day. Amy Dash, our guest, if you're the Big Ten and you're arguing for why you did it, even though you're technically supposed to wait if there's an ongoing investigation by the NCAA, do you present evidence that the NCAA helped you in your investigation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that the Big Ten was able to review, that they said they were able to conclude that this happened, that the sign stealing and the scouting occurred independently of the NCAA. Again, they have the right to make that conclusion. It's just about whether they can hand the punishment down before or after. There's a whole long laundry list of things that they were presented with that I could go into if you needed me to, but that basically there's a lot of evidence they were able to review. Now, another thing is Jim's being punished in a supervisory role, which is appropriate here. Whether he had knowledge or not, customarily, he is responsible. And that's not just in a public interest argument, but that's also that coaches traditionally take the blame in their contracts. That's part of most coaches' contracts, that they are responsible for supervising and they are responsible for things that happen under their watch, whether or not they knew about it.
So Chad brought up a great question earlier in the show, and I mentioned I'm going to save it for you. I don't want to get this in. Chad, the idea that Harbaugh could actually hurt himself by testifying, not help, but he's eager to do it anyway, and whether or not he should.
Yeah, and I think you said, Amy, he's not going to be allowed to do that, or do you think that you expect him to be there?
He'll be there. I don't think he'll be allowed. I'd be surprised, I should say, that he'd be allowed to testify at this point because it seems like it was set up for dueling oral arguments between the attorneys. But then there can be a more expansive hearing where there can be testimony later on in terms of a preliminary injunction, which is something that wouldn't take immediate effect. So he wouldn't be allowed to to coach in the weekend game. However, if a preliminary injunction is put in place later, it could help him because that could stay in place for weeks or months until there's some sort of due process and the case is decided on the merits in a court of law.
Well, it robs us of some hilarious moments if he's not allowed to speak in that, given some of the things he said in his press conference about being Tom Cruise and A Few Good Men, if he's allowed to defend himself. I'd love to hear the quotes from that. So how far can this thing branch out in terms of the argument from Michigan? Because we saw that prepared statement they sent back to the Big Ten, and it goes from, hey, this was our point differential before all this, and here it is after, and it's not that much difference. And, we think Ohio State turned us in, and we think that, Rutgers and other programs had something to do with it. Do you think that that's going to get into the argument here, or are they going to stay very basic in terms of following through with the bylaws on this one?
Yeah, they're really not going. I don't think they're going to get into any of that because that has nothing to do with the question at hand. So the court's like everything to stay very focused, which would exclude his A Few Good Men argument or whatever sort of grandstanding he wants to do that he alluded to. So I think it will stay very focused, and I don't think it will proceed past If the TRO is denied, I don't think that they will pursue the legal route. I could be wrong, but it would defeat the purpose, right? Because by the time they were to even go through the court system, he would have already served the suspension.
So, finally, just quickly, what do you think happens here? Do you think he gets the TRO?
That's a good question. So initially, I did not think that he gets the TRO. However, when I was really examining with a microscope the language of the handbook and the Rule 32 and the sportsmanship policy, I think there's a chance he may get it, only because the NCAA has already launched an investigation, and Rule 32 was in place before the sportsmanship policy, which may be so vague that it might undermine itself. Whereas Rule 32 is very specific and clear that punishment should come after the NCAA concludes its investigation. So I think if you have two competing bodies, you really have to go to the specific language rather than defer to something that might be so broad and vague that it's confusing.
This is fascinating. Amy, thank you for the analysis and opinion here and breaking it down for us, because we couldn't have done it on our own.
If Harbaugh does go a few good men, please come back on after this hearing and we can recap his performance.
That would be a reason to get cameras into the courtroom, which I advocate for.
No doubt.
Take care.
All right, thank you. At Amy-TVs, where you can find her on social.
Someone in the YouTube chat said, get Connor Stallions in with his spy glasses to film the hearing. And
maybe he's
everybody could see it.
Maybe he's the illustrator.
Yeah, the court stenographer.
He's the stenographer.
Yeah, it's I think in terms of the counter argument from the Big Ten, if this the clause about it's clear and detrimental to the well-being of the team and all that, isn't the response, well, you're 4-0 without him on the sideline this year.
Well, I think
so. It hasn't done anything to cost your team anything.
And I
when
don't
he's
know,
not been on the sideline.
I don't know what they can present if anything with this, but I would just present it's the same suspension as what Michigan self-imposed to him earlier this year.
Yeah.
And
you're 4-0.
And they're 4-0.
You're 4-0 without it.
And I would
also I think then a response would be, then why do you care if it's not a big deal? Just let him coach. If he's 4-0 with him on the sideline, right? I mean, there's a number of ways to look at this. It is interesting that bylaw 32 about typically when an NCAA investigation is started, the office will wait to do anything until after it's concluded. Look, there's going to be the argument made, and I think it's a good argument that could be made about the exceptional nature of this and the competitive balance of it, and everyone in the conference having an issue with it. Look, I think it's very much up in the air. Talking to Amy about it, she was hesitant to say one way or the other about what she thinks is going to happen, and in fact, she's kind of changed her mind as the week has gone on.
And I mean, really, it just comes down to the judge having ties, right? As you mentioned earlier, to Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, it could. Look, I would like to think that the judge, regardless of ties, would rule in the way they feel is right and just in this, based on what the power of the Big Ten commissioner really is, right, and what Michigan is arguing. But if I had to guess, they're going to get that temporary restraining order.
Plus, if you're Michigan, you can argue to the NCAA in the future, who knows when, you've already been punished for this. This is going to serve as the punishment, and they're going to move on towards potentially college football playoff. And I also
and Ali says that, and this is right, Harbaugh still being able to coach during the week lessens the punishment greatly. It absolutely does. That's again why I think it's so crazy that Sherrone Moore is acting like there's been a death in the Michigan football family after the game. You were just with the guy right before the bus ride to the stadium.
See,
it's not like you haven't seen him in a few weeks. He's there in every meeting, every game plan session, every film study, every practice during the week. He's just not there during the game.
See, I view it just more as they came down with the punishment prior to the investigation concluding. That, to me, is the argument to be made. And on the flip side, if, what did she say, Article 28 says once the NCAA begins
32.
32, you can't just, you're not supposed to do your own punishment?
Just to wait, until after the NCAA rules.
I mean, didn't we have reports that the NCAA was confirming things and handing things to the Big Ten in part of this?
Well, yeah, but I mean, we know the NCAA is investigated because they were on campus within 2 days.
No, I'm saying
of all of this.
The investigation that was opened by the Big Ten was after the NCAA informed Michigan and the Big Ten about
look,
it.
that's pretty clear cut.
But what I'm saying is the NCAA after that helped the Big Ten in their investigation.
Yeah.
So that would, to me, that benefits the Big Ten's argument against Article 32.
Well, no, because the NCAA, they started their investigation already. So the way she read it is once they start the investigation into the school, doesn't matter who's given what information, you just press pause until that investigation is concluded by the NCAA. So if the NCAA investigation started, then they hand everything over to the Big Ten. What Michigan would argue is you should not be ruling until it's over. What the Big Ten is going to argue is this is extreme circumstances. The commissioner has the power to rule in situations like this with every other bylaw, and we acted in that way.
And
it's going to be interesting to see how this thing falls.
And they're investigating two different things. That's the other argument. The NCAA is investigating whether or not the scouting took place off campus with cameras. And the Big Ten is investigating whether or not a violation was made with the sportsmanship policy. Those are two different things. Again, it's semantics. And I think that's what makes it difficult.
One thing is the violation of the sportsmanship policy, is what
right,
they're arguing.
But they're investigating whether or not it was in violation of the sportsmanship policy, not whether or not it occurred.
The sportsmanship policy is so vague. They could say it's anything. So that helps the Big Ten in that case.
Yes, as vague as Mel Tucker's contract was.
It's true. And private school coaches, when they don't have to reveal
and no matter what happens,
numbers, always vague.
They've punished them more than the NCAA has.
Quote, a good state champion caliber high school boys team would smoke the best team in the WNBA. Then this weekend, after the video was posted and the critics, of course, came for him, he doubled down on what he said, posting this on X. Quote, it's sexist to say women's basketball players aren't as good as men's. That was a question, obviously. It's my opinion, and I'm putting $1 million behind it. If I'm wrong, the WNBA team can take my money and make more from one game than they do for the entire season. Okay, so let's get into this because obviously there's a lot of people out there who are just assuming that Clay is being sexist, that he is trying to really punk the WNBA because let's be honest, the ratings for the WNBA aren't great, which is exactly why Clay made the joke at the end of that. If you were to give them $1 million for losing the bet, that would be more than the WNBA would make regularly for one game under normal circumstances. But the fact remains that men and women biologically super different, and that's what he's talking about. We even look at a boys' high school basketball team and the makeup of their players, what they're able to do, their size, their skills, and look at the WNBA players who are oftentimes much older. They're professional basketball players, but still, the level of competition would not at all be on the same playing field. So, Chris, let's get into that. What is your take on this? The fact that people would say that, Clay, you're being sexist, when reality remains men and women, super different, even at very different ages, different places in their careers, there would be no matchup whatsoever.
I don't even think it's questionable. I love that Clay took it to him. I think a lot of times silence speaks louder than words. The Las Vegas Aces haven't said anything in response yet. Mm-hmm. So, look, you're right. I dug into the rosters, the Las Vegas Aces, and then, look, I've spent some time training at IMG Academy. I work with athletes at a school called Lou High, which is one of the top programs in the country. And we have guards 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". We're on the Aces. The tallest players are 6'3" and 6'4", and those are their bigs. So they don't even have anybody to really account for the bigs on the male teams. And I don't know that it's how in any way is this a sexist
question
thing to say. Yeah.
Well, I have a woman, I think, who will be able to help answer this question. She is super smart. She's super intelligent. I am a big fan of her. Everybody, you're also a big fan of her. We all are. It just has to be said. So let's go ahead and bring in the woman of the hour, Riley Gaines. Hello, Riley. I'm happy to see you again. I feel like I get to spend so much time with you these days.
I know, right? Very good to see you, and I will say it is rainy here as well, which just sucks.
Okay, so I know the last time we talked, you were like bouncing all over the place. Where are you right now?
I'm actually in Nashville, but headed to New York today. So I'll be on deck.
Okay, well, welcome. You get to go from rain to rain.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, Riley, let's get into the topic that we were just discussing. Obviously, Clay being a little bit sarcastic in the way that he framed the question, but he's saying he's willing to make a bet that the WNBA champions, still being the champions, professional basketball players, would not be able to hold a candle to any high school boys basketball team in the country. Is he being sexist, or is he just speaking facts that men and women are very different in terms of what they are capable of athletically?
Boom. Right there. It's not sexist to say men and women are different. It, like you said, it's reality, it's truth, it's common sense, it's logic, it's reasoning. We all know it.
Glad you're with us. 6th and Peabody, our location. Hot Beer, Old Smoky Moonshine. Hot Mic with Hunt and Withrow rolls on across the OutKick network. We say hello to Jim Nagy, Executive Director of the Reese's Senior Bowl, who joins us now. Jim, always great to see you, man. Hope things are well.
Yeah, good to see you guys.
We talked a lot about Michigan, as you might expect. We discussed that with you last week about the possible 20 players that are certainly NFL caliber. J.J. McCarthy's being discussed quite a bit about all of the runs versus the 8 passes. Break down for us, if you can, just what you see from him and what he's capable of if he's not asked to turn around and hand the football off 36 times in the second half.
Yeah, well, I'm a trained scout, so we never really comment on things unless we don't talk out of our rear ends. A lot of people like to do that. A scout will never do that because you can get shown up in a draft room pretty quickly. So I've not studied JJ,
okay,
man. I'm unprepared for this question. As a Michigan alum and watching him on TV, I can tell you what I see.
There we go.
He's a very good athlete for the position. He's got a really loose arm. He can whip it. I just think that play calling had nothing to do with J.J. McCarthy. It was a statement by the coaching staff that they wanted to run it down Penn State's throat, and they did that. I mean, how many times can you line up and run the ball 30 times in a row and ice a game? So to me, that was more about the mentality and a statement the coaching staff was trying to make. Certainly had no bearing on J.J. McCarthy. I think that just talking with guys in the league, he's probably safely a day 2 quarterback, a guy that people in the NFL see as a potential starting quarterback. So yeah, man, you would do that if you didn't have faith in your quarterback. I think that had nothing to do with JJ. I just think it had more about, Sharon Moore, the interim head coach, just wanted to make a statement of what this Michigan football team is and how they were built. And he's the offensive line coach. He takes a lot of pride in that unit. And he put that unit to work the other day.
Yeah, and as far as how they're built, we hear physical, especially when they play Ohio State, Penn State, whatever. How do you does that jump off the page to you in the Big Ten? And then what do you see from their matchups in the college football playoff against the SEC or even TCU?
Yeah, they're a big physical group that played a lot of football. They won the Joe Moore Award 2 years in a row, so they're obviously a good unit. I think they're a better unit than maybe they are individually. Collectively, they're the sum of the parts theory. But I got all those guys, and they've got guys on the bench right now that aren't even playing. That a lot of that was made in the preseason. That we had 7 senior offensive linemen on the Senior Bowl watch list. And there's a chance, like talking to NFL scouts, like those. I think they'll keep a couple guys in. I'll stop by saying that. I think a couple of those guys will stay. But if they all came out, I think all 7 guys would have a decent chance of getting drafted. So, but yeah, I mean, they've got one more big boy football matchup left, and that's the Saturday after Thanksgiving against the Buckeyes. So, and they have tried to do that to Ohio State the last couple of years. They've been the bully a little bit. So, I don't know if that was like a precursor. I don't know if Sharon Moore is trying to make a statement with to the Buckeyes with what they can do to other Big Ten teams, but they seem like they're pretty intentional in their play calling.
You mentioned the Senior Bowl watch list. Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, joins us weekly. The watch list prior to the kickoff of the college football season to now, how much does it change? Do you add to it? Does it really go down as you assess things for what you want to do in February? And how much are you keeping up with that on a daily or maybe hourly basis based on what your scouts are sending in?
Well, yeah, it goes down pretty quickly. There's a pretty quick process of elimination when you're only trying to bring 130 seniors here, and now that list is even shorter now that we can bring the juniors. So there's even less seniors in play now. So when we were at like 700. So yeah, it got narrowed down. But it's just a starting point. I mean, there's guys every year that kind of play themselves onto the radar. We've had guys every year that actually end up getting invites that weren't on the watch list to start the season. So it's a really fluid process. We take a lot of pride in the fact that we stay open-minded through the process. We watch all these guys. We keep our ears open with NFL scouts, with agents will call us on certain players, certainly head coaches, assistant coaches. We owe it to these players. It's really hard when you're not in schools every day like these NFL teams are. You got to use all your resources. So that's even down to like analytics. Like we'll look at the PFF grades on players and certain things like that. So yeah, it is certainly a fluid process.
Yeah, a guy that I feel like we haven't spent a lot of time talking about at quarterback is Jordan Travis at Florida State, because since that game against Clemson, they haven't really been tested. They had a competitive game against Miami this past weekend, but they're sitting in prime position to be one of those 4 playoff teams. What do you think of this senior season for Travis?
Yeah, he's made a nice jump since last year. He's an interesting guy because they don't ask him to do a whole lot, and he can go through some games like cruising along, not doing a whole lot. And then when they need him to make a play, he's got a knack for making a play. And that's a pretty cool trait as a quarterback, whether it's with his legs or taking a shot down the field to like Johnny Wilson or Jaheim Bell is tight end. I mean, Keon Coleman. I mean, he's got some great playmakers. I think, he's going to get picked apart a little bit that way, kind of like we saw with Mac Jones and Joe Burrow when they have these great supporting casts. He truly does have maybe the best supporting cast in college football this year. But to Jordan's credit, he's making those plays when they need them to be made. And coming off these calls we've had with NFL teams the last couple of weeks trying to put our invite list together, he's going to be a guy that gets drafted. A couple of years ago, there was some thought he might be a wide receiver. And now he's firmly going to get drafted as a developmental quarterback. So he's come a long way.
Would you assess Riley Leonard the same way you would have prior to the start of the season?
Yeah, and the injury thing was a bummer, man, because, I mean, we all saw what Duke did early in the year, knocking off Clemson, and there was all this really cool momentum going into like a matchup in Tallahassee and some of these other big games this past week in North Carolina would have been a great one to see Riley out there. But unfortunately, I think it's a foot injury. It might keep him out the rest of the year. So I think we'll see Riley back in college football next year. I'm not sure. He's kind of a local celebrity down here in Mobile. He's from across Mobile Bay from us in Fairhope, Alabama. So everyone down here is big Riley Leonard fans. But he is a true dual threat. He is a really good athlete. He was a great hooper in high school. So we'll see where that goes. And then, the other layer is if whatever happens with Mike Elko, if he ends up in College Station, I mean, he's kind of the name you're seeing out there. What does that do to Riley Leonard? I hate doing that game. I don't want to be the typical media guy where I'm pontificating on where quarterbacks and coaches end up. But I think there's some scenarios in the offseason. Riley, if Coach Elko leaves, Riley's going to be a really sought after guy.
So where's Arch Manning going to end up if Quinn Ewers? I'm kidding. But report is out that Quinn Ewers may be coming back for another year at Texas. What do you think of? I know we've got injury concerns with him this season also, but from what you got to see, what did you make of Ewers and the possibilities if he comes back to Texas, what that offense could look like?
Yeah, I don't know what he's going to do. I talked to some guys at Texas this week about a bunch of their underclassmen. I'm trying to get a handle on the junior thing now that big news dropped last week. We're trying to get an idea of where they're at. I mean, that's a big key to what we're trying to do right now at the Senior Bowl is we're inviting some seniors, right? That I'm already getting phone calls about hey, Jim, we're trying to keep this guy in school. We're gonna put some NIL stuff together, try to keep this guy in another year. So with these juniors, I mean, that's especially important, knowing what the schools, what the player, if they have a feel for what the player wants to do. So I don't know what Quinn's going to do. I know he wants to win a national title. I know that's really important to him. I know the Longhorn program is really important to him. I think what he's going to have to weigh this offseason is with his receivers. He's got A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy, and he's got a really good tight end. Like, what are those guys going to do? So there's just so many moving parts in college football right now because of all the different factors at play, portal, NIL, all these crazy things. It's really kind of like the NFL has become a year-round news cycle. I mean, I feel like that's what college football has become with the portal and all the offseason movement. I don't think Quinn Ewers is going anywhere. I think the question is going to be, does he come out in this year's draft or does he come back? But I don't know. That'll be a interesting plot line for the offseason.
Well, quarterback having a heck of a year statistically is Jaden Daniels at LSU. And Jim, I get, if I go online and look at a projection for him, I get anything from early third round to top 5 overall for Daniels. What do you think about what you've seen in his development in year 2 under Brian Kelly?
Yeah, and it might even be, I hear you, it might even be wider than that in the NFL. There might be some more fourth round I don't know if the league's up there in top 5. I think you're more for the NFL. It's more 2 to 4 right now on Jaden, depending on what team you talk to. But he's certainly had a great year. I'm on the high end of that. I've been on the Jaden Daniels bandwagon since last year because we talked early in the year. I thought he was our most improved player we watched last year, or most improved quarterback, at least, in last year's class. Like he and Bo Nix were the 2 guys that elevated into day 2 for us last year, the end of day 2, and Hendon Hooker as well. And, obviously Hendon came out in the draft to the Lions, but Jaden, to me, is the most exciting player in college football. He's the most unguardable player in college football right now. I don't have a Heisman vote, but if I had one, it would be to Jaden Daniels. I don't care. They've lost 3 games. He has been the most spectacular, dynamic player in college football this year with his arm and his legs. So, I just can't say enough. I could sit here and go on and on about Jaden Daniels, but it was something to watch the other night on TV. I wish I would have been in Tiger Stadium to witness that because that was a historic performance against the Gators.
How about the dynamic play of Cody Schrader for Missouri? The running back, right up your alley, senior, and he's doing a little bit of everything. With the specialized nature now of the NFL, is that guy viewed the same way? Or do we get back to, is there a roster spot just for someone who could step in and do a handful of snaps per game? Because I don't see that anymore in the league.
Yeah, he is one of the greatest stories in college football. I think people are just getting onto it because he just had that historic day himself. I mean, how do you pick SEC Player of the Week this week with
I know.
Jaden doing what he did and COTY doing what he did? But a great story for people that don't know. I mean, a Division II kid from Truman State. I don't even know if most people have heard of Truman State. So for him to bet on himself, and not bet on himself and go to an FCS school or even a group of 5 school, he bets on himself and goes into the SEC, which tells you, speaks volumes about his confidence level as a kid. And just watching the tape this year, there's a little Austin Eckler to this guy for everyone that plays fantasy football. He's just kind of a do-it-all back. He's got great vision. He's tough.
Yeah.
Tough as nails, really dependable. So, yeah, the Missouri coaches have hit me up on his behalf. I've had scouts this past week, and that hadn't happened yet. I'd had a couple scouts hit me up the last couple of days about seeing him here in Mobile, and he's certainly put himself in the conversation. He's had a great year.
Yeah, I mean, the Senior Bowl is perfect for him because he can play multiple spots, too. They can move him around, see what he's like, see the matchups. It's a perfect setup for him. Great for us here as well. A final thing for you, are you headed anywhere this weekend for your scout? Is there a game that you're eager to get feedback on?
I'm actually staying at home. South Alabama plays Marshall, and Marshall's got a couple prospects. Ethan Driscoll, their left tackle, and a kid named Rasheen Ali at running back, who are both really good players, both draftable players, group of 5 level, but both draftable guys, probably mid-round prospects. So I haven't seen those guys. I haven't been up to Huntington in a few years now, so I'm going to catch them in my backyard. And then I got my son coming home for Thanksgiving from Auburn, and it's going to be a great weekend. Excited
for Week 12 coming up as well. Hey, Jim, thank you so much, man. We appreciate this each week, and enjoy the weekend.
All right, guys. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, there's Jim Nagy.
I miss getting a full week off for Thanksgiving. That's what really bums me out when I hear that.
Fall
The
break.
college kids, like the long, you get a month off for Christmas and then a full week off for Thanksgiving.
What was our time off in like high school? Do you remember?
I think we got off like a half day on Wednesday. It wasn't much at all.
Yeah, I think you're right.
We got Thursday and Friday, and that was it.
Yeah.
These week-long vacations for high school kids started well after we were out of high school, Hutton.
I had no fall break.
There was no such thing as fall break.
I didn't have – I had a spring break.
I think one year I got out the day before Christmas Eve for Christmas break. I think it was like December 23rd.
Chad went to school on Christmas Day.
Yeah. And I walked to school on
Uphill
Christmas
both ways.
Day. Right. We opened our gifts at 5 a.m. and then walked to school. No, it was I remember that was just a welcome moment when you made it to college and you like had your last final exam on December 2nd or 3rd and you had the full month off to come back home. So great. And the Thanksgiving break was always fun in college.
How about Cody Schrader,
congrats
by the way?
to Jim
Chad,
Nagy's son.
Take the teams out of it. What a
he was awesome.
It was fantastic. And
he shredded, I mean, in every way, through the air, on the ground. Great performance from him.
Just quickly looking ahead, you've got Utah and Arizona this week, top 25 matchup. Georgia, Tennessee, and some fringe top 25 games as well. But Washington, Oregon State.
This is the rough week in the SEC where you get a lot of easy games, cupcake games for the SEC, and outside of that,
like Ole Miss, Louisiana Monroe.
Yeah, it's Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri, Florida are some good games. Other than that, a lot of cupcakes.
Jimbo Fisher, not the only head coach who was fired. We'll discuss what Mississippi State might do more in depth. Plus, Johnny Manziel and the actor who would play him.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
We live in a land of participation trophies.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
When Leah Thomas walked in that first day, it got silent, and every girl was uncomfortable.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
Is it fair for people to be upset with Barbie?
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna lib. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose. I mean, what have you seen firsthand of how this has affected you in the plant and your fellow employees? Under Joe Biden, the Taliban has retaken Afghanistan. Putin has invaded Ukraine. So if there was ever a time for freaking aliens to inhabit and conquer Earth, now would be that time.
We've seen coaches throw water bottles. We've seen coaches act like idiots. We've seen coaches slap other coaches. But I think if you're involved in carjacking, you're inherently a rotten human. The level of stupid that sometimes gets on our YouTube chat just gives me a headache. You're born a male, play with males. You're born a female, play with females. Don't at me about it. The American people are being cheated. We, ladies and gentlemen, are being cheated.
I made the call to end the Me Too movement. And today I'm going to continue making that case. And that's just a way to further taunt these women, to make them feel less than, to make them realize that this has just become a big joke. Deion Sanders is the Donald Trump of football.
We were directly impacted by the whole Leah Thomas thing, and we were able to see you guys on the ground with your signs supporting. That was huge.
They were saying, oh, it's only 1 or 2. That's rubbish, and we all know that's rubbish. Once those trans-identifying males were able to succeed, it just encouraged others.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Bold taste of a Southern legend.
Sixth, the Peabody location, Yeehaw Beer, Old Smoky Moonshine. Glad you're with us. Hot Mike with Hutton with Throw
We're
rolls
back,
on.
baby.
That's right.
We are back.
That's right. Zach Arnett out as the head coach at Mississippi State. Of course, he was the fill-in and head coach with Mike Leach's passing a year ago. And it was a no-brainer then, right? With their defense. No longer. You think it's Dan Mullen? You mentioned him earlier. That's not a – I think Dan Mullen – I personally, I think he wants to coach again.
Does he want to go backwards?
Do you go back to Mississippi State? But do you go back to Mississippi State where it plays into this angle? You mentioned you're going to 9 games and the new format with I haven't seen Mississippi State's. We know they're playing Ole Miss. You're right. He does kind of have the Stoops treatment of 6 or 7 wins is the expectation, and can you get there? The answer would be yes there, because we've seen him do a lot more than that there. The question would be, do you go there and just settle for that? That would be the expectation.
I think it makes a ton of sense. I really do. I think that would be as close to a home run hire as you could get at Mississippi State. I really believe that. He was never in any danger of ever losing his job at Mississippi State while he was there. If you can stay in Starkville that long and have some level of success the way he did, that is quite the accomplishment in the SEC. Now, as the SEC changes, and my computer is frozen up, I was trying to find their schedule next year to see. I know they play Tennessee, which is a difference, I think, in Knoxville. But I want to see between Oklahoma and Texas who they were playing in year one. Schedule's going to get tougher, especially as they move to 9 conference games. But, I think that would be a good move for them. It'd make a ton of sense.
He gets Mullen's buyout. He gets $1 million every July 15th through 2027 after the lump payout that he had. Looking at their schedule right now, do you have it pulled up over there, Davey? My computer's also down.
Yeah, I got it for 2024. So their non-conference games, Eastern Kentucky, Arizona State, Toledo, and UMass. And their home opponents in the SEC are Arkansas, Florida, Missouri, Texas A&M. Away opponents are Ole Miss, Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee.
So a chance at 6-6, right? They're going to get 4 non-conference wins. You said Arkansas at home, right?
Correct.
That could be 5. Missouri's doable, probably 4. They're going to have a chance to go bowling next year for year one, whoever the coach is. Why not Dan Mullen? He got a ton of success there. He obviously knows the landscape of the university and the recruiting territory. I think they could do a lot worse. The other name is Jamie Chadwell from Liberty. And this is hilarious. Davey, we think that this was something that was fabricated Is that right?
Yes, that is my conclusion on the situation.
So he tweeted or posted on X that they were moving his coach's show to Wednesday, and the university sent out a statement, hey, Coach Chadwell's show for Liberty will be moved to Wednesday night from Tuesday. And he just retweeted and said, see y'all on Wednesday. And then underneath it, people were reposting this. You look at it, it has the location turned on. It was Starkville, Mississippi, is where he posted it from. But apparently that was something that was fabricated.
It looked like a fan came in and edited on the back end. Yeah.
It's really funny, though, that if you left your location on as to why you weren't at your coach's show and you were already in Starkville interviewing.
It's like the rogue flights, like a coaching search.
Yeah.
Where you can't find the athletic director. He's just gone.
That was, that's happened a few times.
There was a
coaching search season.
But look, it's Dan Mullen. If you're at Mississippi State, what level are you going to hire? It's Dan Mullen, a guy who's accomplished a lot already for your program. You're not going to go get some huge name. I don't think that's a possibility at Mississippi State. So you're hiring Jamie Chadwell, who I think is going to be a good coach. I think that would be a good hire for Mississippi State. Also, you're getting that group of 5 coach ready to take a step up, probably, right? Or a coordinator from somewhere else.
Yeah, but I mean,
who's the Dan Lanning out there? That'd be a question I have if I'm Mississippi State or any of these other jobs that come open. Indiana's probably going to make a change at head coach. Who is that coordinator that's a younger guy who is set to make the next step up? Got to ask yourself that also if you're one of these jobs.
So just looking at the list that they put together at On3 for this, Willie Fritz at Tulane, Rhett Lashley at SMU, Jamie Chadwell. They also have on here, which is interesting, Manny Diaz, the Penn State defensive coordinator, and Dan Mullen tops the list.
Manny Diaz was at Mississippi State before, right, as a defensive coordinator for Mullen, I think.
Yes.
So he's got some ties there.
And he was the DC twice there for Mullen, or for Dan Mullen. So
didn't have a good run as head coach in Miami.
No. So, but I mean,
if you gave me the option, if I'm Mississippi State, of Dan Mullen or Manny Diaz, I'm hiring Dan Mullen.
And
I'm not even second guessing that one bit.
He's been excellent at Penn State until we saw what happened this past week with the mauling that took place up front. Chad, so the Manziel Netflix Untold Johnny Football has turned into I really enjoyed it. I wish it was a longer form piece. Would you watch a show of Johnny Manziel played by Miles Teller?
Now, is this a show or a movie that they've talked about? I feel like this is a movie they've discussed that was. So Johnny Manziel was on a podcast talking about it, and they asked him who would play him in his life story, and he said Miles Teller, and then he dropped some news that, in fact, I've met with Miles Teller about playing me, I think, in a movie, is what it was. I would absolutely watch this. First off, I love Miles Teller. He was terrific as Goose's son, Rooster,
he was awesome.
in Top Gun Maverick. He's great and spectacular now. He's been good at everything I've watched. Project X, he makes a small appearance in that. Very underrated comedy film as well. Yes, I would watch Miles Teller as Johnny Manziel. Are you kidding me? If this thing hit the theaters, I doubt it would. It'd probably be straight to streaming. But if it was in theaters, I'd be there opening night to watch Miles Teller portray Johnny Football in a movie.
I absolutely would watch it. I would hope that it's just more about the behind-the-scenes party. It would be like a 2024 version, 25 version of The Hangover.
Well, here's the question I would have about it too, okay? Because if they do something, Manziel's going to have to sign off. And I'm going to get a little bit serious here for a second because Ryan Leaf made us think twice about that documentary with it. How are you going to approach this? I mentioned Project X. Is this thing The Hangover and Project X where it's one big comedy about a guy partying a lot and it kind of makes it into a farce about everything going on? Are you looking at a serious, introspective look into his mental health, addiction problems, and everything else that cost him his job in the NFL? I don't know what type of movie this is, right? Like, what's the vision for this? Because I think if it's Johnny Football behind it, it's probably a comedy, right? It's Wolf of Wall Street. It's not going to be something that's really taking a look at someone with some issues. So,
and they're not going to make that film. They're going to make the film that gets.
They're going to make the film that he signs off on.
Well, but that's attractive. You know, that's what they did for Netflix with the Untold.
Yeah,
they used the thought that he had considered taking his life, and then they put that at the very end, and then everything else was
it's kind of brushed
what it
past
was.
it.
Yeah, so they did the same thing already. You know.
Yeah.
I wanted to add that Miles, if you ever watch the movie Bleed for this, he plays a boxer that basically broke his neck and is trying to fight back and be that comeback story. So if they wanted to get deep with it, Miles has the range in which they would definitely be able to do that. Whiplash was like another great film where it's a more serious character. So I have no issues with that. So I think if the director wanted to take it in that direction of going deep into Johnny's substance issues and that dark depression, they could write a really good script around that, and Miles would definitely be able to knock it out of the park, in my opinion.
It is tough. So Wolf of Wall Street is the example, right? A real-life guy, Jordan Belfort. It's so much easier to watch that movie and be entertained. First off, great performances, and it's Scorsese throughout, one of Hutton's favorite movies, and it's Leo. Great to watch that throughout. Right. But also, I know watching it that Jordan Belfort's okay, right? Like, he survived all of that. He's fine. He's alive. He's well. You know, he's in a different place in life. Like, it's more difficult to watch, I think, if you feel like Johnny Manziel is still either suicidal or suffering through something. So, that's what Ryan Leaf kind of got at with us when we had him on talking about it. Given Ryan Leaf's history also, that was a difficult part for him to process watching the documentary, and he feels like they failed him in this with the Netflix documentary. So, you know, how do you play that movie and how do you play that role and what type of movie is it, I think is a big question. But Miles Teller would crush it as Johnny Manziel, whatever the movie was. Now, look, if this was 10 years from now and it's more of a Wolf of Wall Street comedy type thing, he'd be great in that. And if, as Davey said, if they went serious with it, I think he'd be good.
Yeah, he would be awesome. I mean, he's done plenty of those roles. I mean, what Manziel's doing now is he's running the Money Bar. He's got that going for him, too, on Main Street in College Station.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
He's helping the coaching search, he said. Or would be willing to.
Yeah, like we hung out with him a little bit. He seemed fine. You know, I don't know. It's just I get what Ryan Leaf made me think twice about what I even thought about the documentary. I enjoyed it watching it, but I understand his perspective, saying here's all of this talk about all of his issues, and the focus of it is him and his guys, you know, doing shotgunning drinks at his house in Scottsdale.
But you're right. I mean, that's where the character becomes the person, right? Like, is it Johnny Football or Johnny Manziel? What's the movie on? And
right.
the movie,
or is it both? You know, you could do a little bit of both with that. I don't know what. I'd have to know what it is, who the director is, what they're going for with it to know. But yes, Miles Teller should play him.
Hey, great thoughts. Best of luck and everything to Dick Vitale, Dickie V, who told ESPN and through a statement last month that he was cancer-free following his latest health battle. They are pressing the brakes a bit on his return, though, because his vocal cords are just not there yet. And I think they had hoped that he makes his broadcast return at the end of this month, and they're pushing that back some. I don't rush it, but this is coming from someone who was tired of Dickie V. I would love for him to make a final run doing this. And it's got a Corso feel to it in a way, Chad, where I don't want to see him off air, but I also want to see Dickie V be Dickie V. And the best news is that he let everyone know he's cancer-free.
No, wishing him the best, absolutely. And, I've got my reservations about, you know, some of his work lately, but he is such an instrumental part of college basketball. You mentioned Lee Corso, same thing. Every time I turn on College Game Day and Corso's not there, I get nervous. I get worried when he's not there on the show. So I have a lot of similar feelings about both those guys. And if you've been around those sports or watched any of it, they're synonymous with those games. So wishing him the best of luck.
We got some big games tipping off tonight. College hoops, Davey?
We
Your
do,
team?
yeah.
Your Blue Devils?
The Champions Classic. And this year, Duke will be taking on Michigan State, and then they'll end up having the college football playoff rankings released between games because Kentucky and Kansas will be the final matchup for that. But, I mean, I kind of view that as the beginning of the college basketball season. Whenever this game comes around every Tuesday, this time of year in November, I'm start getting a little excited for it.
It's been the first game of the year. Like, this is actually a week later, I feel like they usually do it. A lot of times this is the tip-off. Like, these teams play in the first game of the year to kick off the season, and now it's kind of a week into the season, week and a half into the season.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that.
Either way, it's good. I love games like this.
And it's
whenever you can get them.
It pulls in the audience because a large portion of the college football fans are invested in these rankings. I mean, you want to know what's going on.
By the way, Davey knows that John Shire lost his first game at Cameron Indoor against Arizona, and Coach K was there for the first time. The first game Coach K attended.
Second.
Duke loses.
Second.
Okay.
Back at it tomorrow. Hope you'll join us 3 o'clock Eastern. Hot Mic with Hutton and Withrow across the OutKick Network.